David asked.
So yeah,
We got you back your answers.
Yes, I was
We might get out of here sooner.
reading them right now.
Melody ain't gonna let that happen.
I had no questions this meeting.
Well, I had questions because I'm new, and so the staff answered them, and
You feel satisfied? It's 5 o'clock.
I feel like, I don't know, I haven't finished reading them all.
I tried. Are we waiting for one
I'm
more?
learning about utilities.
Yeah.
Franchise.
Until 10 now.
What's your bet? Legitimate.
I'm waiting. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Kimberly Holiday, Mayor Pro Tem, and I'd like to call to order the July 8, 2025 City Council work session. And we're going to move on to our regular agenda, starting with item 2A, a discussion regarding property appraisals and property appraisal value protests, brought to us by Leanna Mann from TCAD, the Chief Appraiser. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you all for inviting me. I provided a memo for each of you. I was asked to just give an update on estimates of value for the 2025 tax year and some commercial and litigation updates. So as of right now, we are trending a little higher than our initial April estimate. So as of this morning, we are estimating that the net taxable value for City of Pflugerville will be 12.3 million. I'm sorry, 12.3 billion. That does include 151 in new value. I provided a box that shows we are only 76% complete with our protest. Protest deadline was May 15th.
How much of a variance was from your original estimate?
The original estimate were about 4% over.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're trending. We did some in our estimates this year. This was my first year preparing them. We really looked at value trends over the protest season the last 5 years to determine what that value loss trend was really what we were experiencing. So we increased our value loss trend, which is why your estimate was slightly lower than in previous years, but I think it is more accurate of where we'll end up.
And that 5-year period includes the COVID period as well. Did you see any deviation or differences in how people were actually protesting and any different assessments? Because I remember, wasn't there a moratorium in that time period too as well regarding what assessed values were?
And that was the 2020 year.
Okay.
We lost data and access to sales data, which prohibited us from reappraising that year.
Okay.
During COVID, we implemented a lot of remote capabilities for property owners, and they really took hold of that. We actually saw increased protest volume, which we have every year.
6.5.
But we really tried to implement ways that property owners could do things easily from their home, and they've continued to use those avenues past COVID. So it's been very successful. We do anticipate that we will certify the appraisal roll on July 18th and have letters out to the city by July 23rd. The residential average market value of a homestead property in Pflugerville is up to $404,000, which is a 4% decline over 2024. The taxable value has increased 2.8%, and that is $383,000. And that's mainly just due to that homestead cap limitation that allows them to only experience that 10% growth year over year. On page 2, I broke down the property type by parcel count and by value. And as you can see, 90% of your properties by parcel are residential. However, there are 31% of commercial properties that hold value. So 31% of your total appraisal roll is commercial value. That is approximately 1,100 accounts. So not many accounts, but they do have quite a bit of value.
Which obviously shows why the need for us to make sure buttress our commercial impact for citizens.
Could you give me an idea how we stack up against other communities, similar situated communities here in Travis County, seeing that roughly 60% of our taxable value is coming from residential? Is that typical, or is there a goal of 50-50? What are you seeing?
It varies based on different councils and their preferences on the policies they're setting. Y'all do have Amazon, of course, here, which is a huge contributor to your commercial value. The top 10 taxpayers are on the third page, but it varies across the county.
Travis County as a whole, can you tell me the commercial versus residential breakdown?
It's very similar, about 60-40,
Okay.
but then about 80% of value is in commercial properties.
Okay, thank you.
Do we know how this has changed over time, the percentage breakout between commercial and residential value?
Not off the top of my head, but I can get that for council.
I'm just wondering, because Amazon's fairly new, and they're taking the top, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the number one is business personal property.
Yeah, and the second one. is
And
the
number one
commercial
in,
real estate.
in value.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because I think that would be important historical data to show how our economic development has impacted our taxable value over time and decreasing the burden on the homeowner.
Yeah, I can give you a 10-year trend.
That's why I was interested the way Lena put it when she answered Doug's question was that it depends on the council and the policies that they interest. I was like, okay, that's an interesting way to put it. Fair.
It does vary across the county.
Do you have any sort of feedback about the change and the exemption for the business personal property?
Yeah, I provided an estimate late last week. So House Bill 9, which is the personal property exemption, is effective for January of 2026. So it won't hit your 2025 tax roll. There are still a lot of questions that we have. We put together a work group of different attorneys that work with appraisal districts to try and get some consistency on the legal interpretation of the bill. There are some very vague terms in there, like business enterprise, common business enterprise, and how those are going to be implemented across the state is still a question. But I think, and I can pull the actual data, but I did provide it to staff last week.
When will the controller's office give some guidance on that?
That's a good question. I would expect probably September or October,
Okay.
which is challenging for us because this will be a complete rewrite of our appraisal systems, programming wise. So it's going to be a very busy fall.
I was just wondering if we had any sort of idea of out of the 9.3% of taxable value on the personal property, what percentage of that is from small businesses that would be positively impacted by this bill in reducing their property taxes?
There was over $1 billion in value that I believe would be exempted from the appraisal roll.
Wow.
Tracy, do you recall? Okay, I can share that with y'all though as well.
Thank you.
Billion.
It's significant. And for cities and cities and counties who don't get the school finance formula that reimburses them for those exemptions, it's going to be challenging. But it is quite a bit of value that gets taken.
So let's be clear, and I think Melody, because in the end, I mean, I do believe that citizens should be protesting no matter what. This should go from that. So, I mean, it helps the person who owns the property down the line, so it's going to be a positive net benefit for them. However, for cities and for counties who already have a diminished budget, given 3.5% as a limitation, that's going to be pretty significant. For you said $1 billion
In value.
in value. I mean, that's
Is that
still-
across the state or for us?
I don't want to speak specifically.
Okay.
Is that
okay.
Travis County or Pflugerville?
I was
I
thinking-
pulled it for City of Pflugerville specifically, but I don't recall.
Okay.
I pulled it for probably 30 different entities in the last few weeks, so I don't recall exactly what City of Pflugerville was, but I can share that.
So you said it was 1.1 million.
Can we ask you to come up?
In revenue.
Who's that lady in the white dress
Yes,
speaking right now?
I'm like, I gotta put on my glasses.
Why are you making me have to do this?
Yeah, she sent this to us last week. It's 1.1 levy loss based on the 2024 tax.
1.1 billion?
Million.
Thank you.
Now, the tax rate calculation will take up most of that. You're just have to know. the revenue
It's
rate
just a
that's higher.
shift from business
Yeah.
personal property onto our homeowners when we do something like that.
Now, there's also the increased homestead exemption and over 65 and disabled persons that will be in effect for 2025.
As I understand, that applies to school districts.
It is school districts
Yeah,
only.
so some folks will get a benefit from that on the school taxes, but from a city tax perspective, they won't get a break based on that exemption.
But we already put one in.
We put one in, we can look at increasing it, but at this point, that change from the state is going to disproportionately shift the burden onto residential.
So in terms of litigation, we have seen a significant increase in Chapter 42 appeals. The last 10 years, we've seen a 570% increase in the volume of litigation we're handling.
Could you articulate litigation for our constituents? Because some people may look at it as an appeal, and there's a line of delineation between an appeal process and actually true litigation.
Of course. Yeah, so a Chapter 41 appeal is the protest process where you get your notice of appraised value and property owners or agents that they hire can then protest their value. If they get through that process and are still not satisfied with the value, they have the option to go through arbitration or a Chapter 42 litigation where they file a lawsuit in district court.
Now, is this 570% increase over what area? Is this the state? Is this the county?
This is Travis County as a whole.
Travis County. Do we have any information about other surrounding counties and what their impact is on
It's the same across the
It is,
state.
okay.
Yeah, there've been a lot of changes in the property tax system, but specifically equal and uniform when it was passed back in 2008 or 9. It really changed just the environment. Predominantly commercial properties are the ones who are litigating, which again just shifts that burden to residential property owners. But they're at a point where if they don't litigate and their competitors do, they're at a disadvantage.
So if they're successful at litigation, does that mean that the original appraisal was not a good estimate of value?
Shots fired.
We
Go
get
ahead.
asked
Well, I believe that happens a lot because I've seen it myself.
Leading the witness.
So in a system where you have thousands of lawsuits, it's just not possible for our office or the court system, frankly, to handle that many lawsuits in a fiscal year. Again, 99% of them settle. We go to trial
That's
2
what I
or
was about
3
to
times
say.
a year.
Yeah.
And have been successful in most of our trials. But again, it's a business decision where they're at a disadvantage if they don't file litigation.
Lena, okay, now you have me a little confused. You said that you're the majority of the time been successful at trial, but you're still having a 99%. Well, and I'm just using your numbers, but like you still have a significant portion that's settled. If you're having, so that makes me more intrigued about the settlement. So are you getting settlements that are of value to the appraisal district, that meaning that, hey, listen, we are more likely than not going to go ahead and win here, but just for cost benefit analysis, it's just better for us to settle this? Or how are these settlements going with that as well? And is this through any sort of mediation, or is this true party to party settlement? How are the majority of those cases going?
So it varies.
Okay.
We go through multiple rounds. So we'll go through a settlement conference where we just sit informally with their attorney and our attorney.
Correct.
Try to reach an agreement. We get data from them. We give them our data, do that exchange. If we still can't reach a settlement there, then we would then go on to the court process where they have mediation scheduled and additional settlement.
Mandatory mediation in Travis County, yeah.
But it's really an analysis we have to do on a case-by-case basis for our taxing entities, because y'all wouldn't fund our budget if we had to go to trial 5,000 times in a year. It would be so cost prohibitive. And
Well, that's why we have county attorneys.
we are not part of the county.
No.
We are a separate special
I
district.
believe
Then
you.
who hires who represents you in court?
We have a few in-house, we have 2 in-house counsels.
Okay.
And then for cases that we don't reach a settlement on, we usually send those to outside counsel.
Who's usually? I mean, you.
We have multiple, so we use Everton and Sanchez, we use McCurry, Veselka, Bragg and Allen. We use Purdy Brandon some. I mean, so we have multiple outside counsels because we have to determine workload for them too and how many cases we send to them.
Is that through a? That's interesting. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So I'm curious about these numbers you presented and trying to understand the impact. I see in 2024, 221 lawsuits of a certified value of 1.077 value, right? And then the active certified value being much lower than that. How can I interpret this? What should I expect that the active certified value will increase? That our a judged value will increase, that will, as we go through this lawsuit process, we will see that number on the first page climb a little bit more, or should I expect it to fall?
So the active certified are still open cases. So the certified and a judged value are finalized litigation. So for 2024, we have 833 million for City of Pflugerville only that's still in active
It's
litigation.
still in litigation.
Correct.
Okay.
We've seen a value loss based from litigation only of 6.26%.
So this 833 million over here in this far column, that is what is currently in litigation. And so based on your percentages, we should expect 2 or 3% of that reduced when it hits the final rolls?
6.26, but when we prepare our certified estimates to you in July, that's all accounted for. So we
Okay.
account for, I used a 10% estimate last year for value loss in litigation. So that's already been built into your values that we gave you in July.
Okay.
Interesting. How did you? What mathematical formula did you use to deduce that?
I look at a historical average, and so, like for City of Pflugerville, you can see back in 2016 through 18, we had much higher value loss.
Yeah.
And we've brought that down year over year, so I think last year I used a 5-year trend.
Do you know what to attribute to those? The 2012, 2016, 2017?
Not specifically, but 2016 through 2019, we didn't have an in-house litigation team, and so a lot of things
Okay.
were being farmed out. We also saw significant increase in litigation filed. And so again, there's a business decision of, can we handle these cases? Do we have to settle at a higher percentage? And so that was probably some of that decision that was made.
So you're saying the world needs more lawyers?
In the property tax realm, we do need more.
See, you hear that? See, it's on the record. Thank you. We appreciate
Or
that.
less
We
litigious
appreciate
citizens. I would prefer a less
More
litigious
accurate
society.
estimates of the value.
And again, litigation doesn't have to do with our accuracy of values. The comptroller's office studies us year over year. And we passed our property value study in 2024. Our values were at 0.999% of the median. So even the comptroller said we were doing, our noticed values were correct. Now that value loss through the protest season and litigation is not something they test, but.
And that value loss, particularly in the litigation, that's typically based on the comparative values, not necessarily the market values. Is that accurate?
A lot of it is what we call an equity argument. And so as you go through the protest season and values are decreased through the appraisal review board process, that then creates an inequity. And so they file litigation to then get that reduced value to be equitable. And it's the equal and uniform statute that was implemented. I think it's a good policy. I think it has a lot of ramifications for protests and litigation that we're seeing.
All right. The story I've heard in the past is that, let's say, every Lowe's store is built exactly the same. So whether it's in Fort Worth or Midland or downtown Austin, they want their value to be exactly the same. That's equitable, and that's so when we send out market-based appraisals, they're incredibly accurate, but they might not be equitable from that perspective, and that's the litigation that we come
Who is
across.
telling you these stories?
That is an appraisal methodology called dark store theory, and that's, yes, one aspect of it. But even a home in your next door neighbor, if one protests and the other doesn't, and they get a 5% value reduction through protest, now this property is inequitable. And so, in theory, everyone at the end would be equalized, but the system's not designed that way. And so they file post-appeal litigation to try and get that equity.
And I take umbrage with, I'm not going to name entities like you, certain big box entities saying that, hey, yeah, listen, we had the same value here as we would in East Texas.
It's the exact same
or
building,
something
right?
like that. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And it becomes very challenging when you have very specialized, like Circuit of the Americas, for example. There's very few comparable properties. And so that it becomes really difficult then. I would also like to point out the homesteads in City of Pflugerville, while y'all don't offer an exemption, people who own and occupy their homes still do get a huge benefit from the homestead limitation cap, which is a 10% threshold on the increase they have to experience each
Every
year.
year.
We estimate there are about 2,000 people within the city of Pflugerville that don't have a homestead exemption but qualify. And so we've done a lot of outreach in both Pflugerville and Manor throughout the last year. And we are going to do a last minute exemption clinic on August 2nd at the Pflugerville Public Library. So anyone who you know that might qualify for that exemption, they can come, we can help them fill out the application. and
When
get
is
that
that?
exemption. August 2nd from 10:30 to 12.
Okay.
And how do you estimate those households? Just the mailing address is the same as the property address, or
No, we look at census data.
census? Okay.
They provide a lot of really great data, so we compare how many homesteads we have on the appraisal roll versus how many households they say live in the area, which is why it's just an estimate, but there's a significant number in Pflugerville that qualify for the exemption but just don't have it.
Now, there was the homestead exemption verification process that happened. Do you have any details about the results of that? Because I personally got the information saying you need to recertify your exemption. I had to send them information. It wasn't too onerous, but just wondering if that was successful in catching, people who are claiming the exemption who actually don't qualify.
So, background, 88th special session, they passed the homestead exemption audit requirement, which requires appraisal districts to audit homestead properties once every 5 years. So this past fall, we started with our first year. We audited 80,000 accounts. And while I'm sure we did discover some fraud, I think what the bigger impact was elderly or people who just didn't respond who qualify for the exemption but
Okay.
aren't getting it now. So I think that was the real impact we saw, unfortunately.
Let me ask you follow up on that. When you're auditing that, is that just for the homestead exemption?
Correct.
But if they lose, if in the case of the elderly, if they lose the homestead exemption, do they also automatically lose their senior exemptions as well?
They would because they fall under the umbrella of the general residence homestead.
So if they don't have that, so that has far-reaching ramifications.
It does.
And you have to positively, as she said, identify as such. So some people got the benefit of the doubt previously. That's not the case anymore.
We are looking at other avenues that we can automate some of that with some vendors to not require homeowners to send us the information we need, but it'll be a year or two process before we get there. We had about 4% of those audited that actually had their exemptions removed, and we can go back 2 years. So what we expect is going to happen is they get their tax bill, see the huge increase in taxes, and then they'll call us and we can get that exemption put back on.
Interesting.
Okay, so when you say that it was removed, it wasn't because you found them to not be eligible, it's just that they didn't respond?
So we found them to not be eligible and they didn't respond. So we did an initial
Okay.
review to see if we could determine that they still own and occupy and have a current driver's license. If we could do that, we didn't send a letter. If we couldn't, through our limited sources, verify that, then we sent them a letter, multiple letters. It ended up being 6 or 7 different contact points. And those who were over at the age of 65, we even tried to call and email any contact information we had with them. And so there were about 4% of people that lost their exemptions. And Pflugerville was one of the harder hit areas.
Let's talk about the TERS. You gave I guess, wanted to hear from you first, because that was the one that really just got our attention, like, whoa, what's going on? So you gave a good brief synopsis of, I think it's pretty good for you to start off with just telling the public what in your words, what occurred.
Sure. So the subdistrict 4 within the city of Pflugerville TERS, it had a base year of 2022. So the first year we reported a base value was in 2023. Regrettably, that initial reporting was wrong. We corrected it by April 2024 and sent that to the city and the tax office that helps with tax rate calculations. I was not the chief appraiser at that time. That was one area that really it's complex, and the chief appraiser is the one who handles it. So once we discovered this issue, I went through and did a complete audit of all TERS within Travis County. set up some processes and procedures to ensure that that reporting is accurate moving forward. We're checking it every month when we send our supplement to the tax office. And so we have put in processes to fix that issue. The base value, and where it becomes complicated for us is that we don't use that base value. So while the overall base value total was correct in the reports, the individual properties weren't totaling to the correct base value. And since that never hits our system for anything we use, we didn't identify it as an error until 2024.
Interesting.
When you did that countywide audit, did you find any other TERS that had similar issues?
I did not.
Just us.
Just City of
Uniquely
Pflugerville.
Pflugerville. All right.
So I am sorry about that, but rest
Oh,
assured
we're
it will
sorry
not
too.
happen again.
But I mean, it is what it is.
Any other questions, council? Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate you being here
Thank you
tonight.
for being here,
And
ma'am.
I'll get those additional data points for you in the next day or so.
That'd be great. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, now we'll move on to agenda item 2B, which is a presentation regarding annexation study. Make some changes here. Emily, Jeremy, and Matthew, welcome. Matthew Prosser is with us from Economic and Planning Systems Incorporated.
Sound very good. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Tonight we'll bring to you the work session item related to the annexation study we've been speaking with you all about over the last about 18 months or so. Before Jeremy and Matt walk you through that, I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the reminders of the discussion that we had at your retreat in 2024 and have had various discussions over the last 18 months related to annexation. Legislation has passed over the past many legislative sessions that have really restricted our ability to unilaterally annex property in the city. And so while this will be a great tool when we have those requests by property owners, please know that we're very restricted on our ability to annex without property owner consent. And so in looking at how we achieve that over time, we want to make sure that we're effectively planning for infrastructure, for land use, and not leapfrogging over certain areas. One of the items we talked about in our retreat, which has been some time, is the amount of vacant land currently in our city limits. And so we have a lot of undeveloped acres, over 2,500. We're about 31% left to develop within our current city limits. Those are areas that are already served with infrastructure and roadways and that don't have those additional costs to our community in order to provide for service to those annexation areas. And so when we're thinking about that, that's quite a bit of land when we're talking about 2,500, 2,900 acres. That's 215 stone hills. And so that's a lot of land left within the city limits to annex that is already served with infrastructure. And so I want to keep that in mind because we do have issues being able to just annex property without the consent of property owners as we move. And we want to be thoughtful as we proceed with any requests that come forward to us for annexation and make sure that we're making, from a staff perspective, the right recommendations to the council for your final, of course, decision on any of those types of requests.
Wouldn't the corollary be to that if we have specific vacant land, there's a reason why it hasn't been filled yet? And additionally speaking, I don't think the onus necessitates any desire from anybody from council or staff to unilaterally annex land, but instead have proactive conversations with folks who are interested in doing so.
Certainly, and so you've seen some of those annexations come forward right when it makes sense. When we've got infrastructure nearby, there's one on Cameron, which there was a rezoning on your tonight's agenda for second reading. That's a property that was currently annexed that is nearby. It doesn't have that leapfrog effect, and so we just want to be sure that we're being mindful of that and the infrastructure costs related to it. And so this study will help us to analyze that as we move forward with any of those requests. But again, really being mindful to the cost of our current residents to facilitate that as those requests come in the future.
Can you explain, just for others who may be listening now or on replay, what would be the benefits to the city of annexation?
Well, it really depends on the requests, right? And kind of the mix of that, the proposal that comes forward to us. So there may be a piece of property that comes forward and it's a large piece of land providing some development that we don't have in the city. that we are able to serve. And so it really, it's going to be dependent on each one of those requests that come in. Certainly, I think when we have requests that are on the fringes, that we look to see if there's places that are already in the city limits that we could locate those end users initially. A lot of times those are all in communications with those property owners and ultimately those developers.
Thank you.
Okay. Jeremy.
I don't have anything else to say. Ian, just kidding. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and to be able to go through the conversation. We wanted to do a presentation with you all before handing over the documents so that we could give you essentially a precursor or an overview, if you will, of the project and make sure that you hear from our consultant who's worked very diligently on this. This has also been internally from the city's perspective, staff, all the different departments have been involved in it, in the review and in those conversations. So we wanted to make sure that we came forward and be able to provide this presentation to give you that input. And as Emily mentioned, when we receive annexation requests, we're going off of our comprehensive plan. We're looking at, does it make sense from a planning perspective? But some of those elements that are missing is just this tool, that annexation tool that gives us that financial aspect. And so we want to be able to present that information to you with those annexation requests. In this tool, we now will have this cool output page that we'll be able to include with our summaries to give you some more information, give you that guidance and that tool to make the decision, does it fiscally make sense to do it? And you'll be able to see short-term as well as some long-term pieces.
So
I don't wanna
Jeremy, I'm glad you said that from the onset, because one of the things I know that it's been a unique challenge. It's probably a good way for me to articulate it, to find a partner who is going to be able to actually find the actual mathematics and science to actually figure out what tools are necessary, what information, what data points are value to actually make a concrete decision on these things. I'd like to still see the underlying documents that create the criterion, create the formula that goes with that. Unless you're telling me it's some black box like generative AI that just pops out some answer that we got from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do appreciate you saying that from the onset. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, no. Well, I always ask these questions, so I appreciate that. But I'm interested in seeing the presentation, but I'm assuming that some of the costs will be, what are the costs of the roads? What are the costs of the utilities, wastewater? How far are the current lines to this property? What would be the cost to the city to then add all of these utilities? And is there anything besides those costs that are costs of annexation to the city? Yes.
Yeah.
Some other ones, okay, that you'll go through.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll let you do your
We'll get into
presentation.
some of those
Yep.
pieces too. So we'll just turn it over to Matt, and Matt can go through walk through the model itself. Talks about the fiscal analysis, about the tool itself, and also, so we tasked EPS to be able to provide us with the fiscal analysis tool. Also to then take that tool and put it into practice, and so we came up with different scenarios that you'll see where we wanted to see, how can we use this tool to, in arbitrary kind of sense, what does it look like? And so this report does create that, so you'll be able to see those things. Also includes different types of land uses. I'm stealing the thunder again. I will turn it over to Matt.
I don't know. I was getting in the rhythm, dude.
Yeah. So,
You're doing great. Keep going.
yeah. So these were the tasks that were included in it, and so ultimately they were able to come up with the report, and it also includes some policy that we found with that. So I think I hit that slide.
It's on you. Oh, okay.
Right
Yeah.
back. So if you want to just scroll.
Yep. Sure. Thank you all for having me here tonight. I'm Matt Pross. I'm a principal with Economic and Planning Systems. We're a land use economics firm that does various different economics-related tasks, including fiscal impact analysis and land use planning services. So we, as you know, were hired by you all to help sort of understand what the implications of annexation would be on the community. And to do that, we built a fiscal model And then, as Jeremy mentioned, use that model to test some different scenarios to kind of, one, refine the model, but two, help identify some different policy decision points for you all. And so I'm going to walk you through an overview of the model, an overview of how we used the model, and then sort of what ultimately we're delivering in terms of a product for you all, in terms of how you can use this analysis going forward to evaluate future requests. And so what a fiscal model does is it evaluates the impact of annexation and really the development that's going to occur within the annexed area on the city's budgets. And so we estimate new revenues, public service costs that include roads, police. Actually, we evaluate all of the different expenditure items in your budget to determine what their potential impact is related to new developments. We break those down based on sort of ongoing versus one-time expenditures and revenues, and ultimately develop sort of what we call a net fiscal impact. So revenues minus expenditures. And so for you all, we build a custom model based on your budget, and then, like I said, use that to analyze some different scenarios to help provide some direction, and also, like I said, refine the tool for your future use.
Matthew, how many other cities have you created this tool for?
Done fiscal impact analysis.
No, rejection, non-responsive. Created a specific, such a specific tool for utilization by a city.
Yeah, so we've done, I would say, probably over 100 different fiscal impact analyses for communities.
My apologies. Not a fiscal impact analysis,
Yes,
but
a
the specific model tool
Yes.
utilized that's either analogous or the same as what's being proffered here.
I don't know the exact number. I would say from my personal experience, I've developed anywhere between 5 to 10 models that
Okay.
were specific to the communities and then turned over in some form for the community to use going forward. And so to develop the model, we use your budget data, actually your audited financial reports from the most recent year that we had. And we use that to develop what we call nexus factors. And that basically is how do we tie costs and revenues to development. And then we use development programs for our scenarios to estimate what the impact would be. And like I said, that generates what we call sort of a net fiscal impact related to those expenditures and revenues. And so for you specifically, the focus was on certain governmental funds that have a direct nexus or tie to development. Where there isn't already sort of a cost recovery mechanism in place. And so for water, wastewater, for instance, we looked at that and evaluated those in terms of specific locations, but those funds, enterprise funds, are designed to have cost recovery in terms of both the connection fees that you charge as well as your user rate fees. Where that connection often doesn't occur is in things like the general fund, where there isn't a direct tie between what you charge a resident for their services and the services provided. And that mostly is in the general fund. And so that was the big focus of our effort, as well as looking at the impacts of capital improvement needs that you fund through both your capital projects fund, as well as debt service that you've used to repay different bond issuances over time.
So to be clear, specifically what we're looking at are models or a proposal where in fact there is not a cost recovery tool
Yeah.
able to be utilized.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
Yep.
Now, I do have a question because some of them, there may be a cost recovery tool, but how do we know that the costs are that the fees are in line with the costs, either higher or lower?
Yeah, so for like water and wastewater connection fees, you usually do a study that ties the cost of connection to the fee that you're charging, or you do a rate fee for those specific utilities. And those are pretty involved studies specific to that utility. And so you probably do that on a routine basis for those aspects. But where, like I said, it is an enterprise or business like fund, that sort of nexus isn't often directly created.
Thank you.
So will you, within this model, you take into account the roadway and the wastewater and water impact fees?
Yeah, specifically, the roadway impact fee is a big portion of what we're looking at in terms of the debt service and capital improvement requirements. We did not model out, like I said, the water and wastewater funds specifically because that they are these enterprise and they usually are more involved studies related to that and sort of entrusted that utility to have sized their connection fees correctly to address the future impacts.
And those utilities are served whether it's in our ETJ or the city limits.
Yes.
So regardless of where it's located, water, wastewater, if it's in our CCN, we're serving those areas versus roads, which are maintained by like the county, or PD, like that would be covered by the sheriff.
Isn't our impact fees a cost recovery
They
mechanism?
are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He,
To
I was
some
just saying-
degree,
yeah, that's what I was asking.
depending
Yeah.
if we've set them accurately.
Yes, that's
There,
the
and you'll see
question.
there's
That's the
com-
question.
there's complications
Need to work on that.
too, which we'll get into, which is one of the things that we found in the study.
And you said the county is supposed to take care of their roads?
Supposed to.
Well, the ledge apparently thinks that's what they do all the time. Interesting.
So this slide sort of just simplifies what I've already sort of iterated, that we develop cost factors that apply to new residents and jobs that will locate in an annexed area, and we estimate those net fiscal impacts through sort of those factors we've derived. And so the big result or the end result of our effort really is an evaluation tool that you all can utilize going forward to analyze annexation requests. And so I wanted to give you an overview of that tool. And so what we've sort of simplified this pretty complex model down to is an input page and an output page. And so the input page is what staff can use with information provided by the applicant to input the factors needed to run the model on a case-by-case basis. And so this screenshot here shows some of those development program inputs that an applicant would have to provide. So if we were going to annex, and this is the proposed development that we were going to have, this is the number of units we're going to build by type, the amount of commercial or industrial space, the amount of new roadways, both arterial, collectors, and local, that will be created and then maintained by the city. There's also a component of existing infrastructure that will be that can be annexed as well. And so one of the biggest things, and I'll touch on this multiple times, one of the biggest things for annexation a lot of times is taking over the county road that's associated with the development next to it to provide access. And so a lot of times the cost of upgrading that roadway for safety needs, maintaining it over time until you're able to do a full sort of capital replacement of it, is a lot of costs that often drives major implications to you all of that annexation. And so we built in the opportunity to input the different county roads that would be annexed as part of the project, and then some different levels of estimated maintenance improvements as well as capital improvements over time that you can estimate or assume you're going to make related to the annexation. And so that is really a part where we put a lot of focus on trying to provide some estimates of what that implication of those county roads will be over time. As well as there's the obvious dedication of parkland that comes with any development. And then also the introduction of this idea of a municipal service area. And I'll get into that in a second. But these are different areas within your ETJ that we defined with staff that have differing implications on costs. Lastly, obviously, there's a quantitative aspect of evaluating annexations as well as a qualitative. And there are reasons, as the Mayor Pro Tem sort of alluded to, for annexation that are related to furthering policy goals within your comprehensive plan. And so we identified some specific policy statements from your comprehensive plan that might relate to annexation. And then as staff is evaluating this annexation, they can kind of check off whether or not that policy statement is met by the proposed development within the annexation. And so it provides both sort of a quantitative as well as a qualitative assessment.
Matthew, you said in passing that this was you simplified or streamlined the specific tool for utilization. What either data point or factor did you eliminate that either is different from what you've done prior to it, or something that we may want to take into consideration that isn't taken right here?
So I guess maybe I didn't say that right. So the full functioning model is there.
Okay.
In terms of staff just using it from a specific request evaluation, we simplified where they have to enter data.
Okay.
And so it's just on one input. With the model, we've provided a user guide for the model that provides direction on specific data points, really budget data a lot of times, that need to be upgraded on or updated on like an annual or biannual basis, and some direction to that. And so really just wanting to simplify the interface for, more routine use as opposed to the long-term maintenance, is sort of what I was referring to there.
So when you have revised the model to be used for our city and our staff, is it more the other times you use it is more of like an annual study that you do for a community versus the community or the city or the staff doing it for ourselves? Is that the difference between?
It depends on what the community wants and feels the level of analysis that's needed. And so where we've built a model to evaluate specific annexation requests, it's where a community really wanted to understand those implications and have sort of a process for doing that. There's a couple different approaches that we've done that. Some places we've just derived pretty simple factors that you could apply to different development programs. This is a little more of an enhanced approach compared to that. There are other communities, though, that just kind of want to know, all right, what uses generate positive and negative impacts at a high level or a generic level, and then using that guidance to develop policy that they use to evaluate to annexation. And so not necessarily using a full fiscal model for the evaluation, but just using the policy that was derived out of our study that we did. And that's done less frequently. It's more sort of, maybe every 10 years or something with a comprehensive plan. You do that evaluation. It helps guide your policy development, and you use that policy as your evaluation criteria for annexation requests.
Okay, so this was revised or enhanced for us so that we
Yes.
can use it on a project by project basis.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
So this
How big is
slide
that?
shows
How
the
big
out-
is that manual?
What?
How big is that manual?
It's not terribly big. It's I forget. It's 30 pages. It's not too bad.
I was one of the people when I got my Nintendo. I definitely did not read the manual. So just making sure.
The output page. So there's the input page, and the output page produces sort of summarized measurements of the fiscal impact. And so we looked at fiscal impact from two different aspects. One is the ongoing annual impact to the general fund. And so what are revenues versus costs to the general fund on an annual basis. And then we looked at the capital implications of the annexation. So we compared estimated capital costs related to taking over roadways and other things to how much you would generate from two sources. One, the roadway impact fee, as well as the INS portion of your property tax. So the assumption is that you use that debt service property tax to pay off capital improvements. And sort of comparing those sort of capital improvements to those revenues is the other element that we use. And then ultimately, we look at that over 30 years and sort of get a net fiscal impact number over 30 years. And then we have these sort of gauges to assess sort of how impactful the levels of capital improvements that are needed are in terms of your budget. So a lot of times you'll have an annexation on a roadway on the north side, which will require you to take over a portion of that county road. It may not be that the roadway impact fee will pay for all of that cost, but the assumption is potentially in the future, the south side of the road will be annexed as well and then contribute to that. And so we gave various levels of indication of how impactful these capital costs are related to taking on this annexation.
Is there a pro rata factor or a delay factor in that calculation? Reason I ask, if we annex the property, it doesn't mean we're rebuilding that road tomorrow, right?
No.
We might not rebuild that road for 3, 5, 7
Yes.
years, depending on the traffic and the saturation.
Yeah, so what part of the input page is one, the level of investment or improvement that Public Works typically uses. And so there's 5 different options for that. And along with that, we put in the ability to estimate which year those improvements would occur. And so it does factor in a delayed component to that.
Can you explain the math on this page?
Yeah, so,
I'm like, how did the bottom
Yes.
number, how did you calculate that?
all right, so the top number, the 52,000, is the impact on the general fund from a net perspective. And so this hypothetical project generates a $52,000 annual net positive impact on the city. The next measurement is a comparison of the capital costs related to taking over the county roadway to the roadway impact fee that's charged, as well as the INS portion of the property tax. And then overall, we compared over 30 years, the ongoing impacts to the general fund as well as the capital improvement impacts. And so over that 30-year period, this project would have a negative $13 million impact on the city. Yeah.
So I guess it's the roadway impact or the capital expenditure piece that's missing. Like you couldn't recreate that number with this data that's listed.
Right, yeah, that
Okay.
is sort of an evaluation piece. So we have factors that you can use to estimate those, but really the reality is it's sort of on a case-by-case basis. And so the tool helps you kind of get a relative estimate of that cost, but, you know, it's very specific to the roadway.
Okay, so but the annual general fund impact includes all the services.
Yes, all the services that are provided within the general fund, yeah.
So it looks like there's a lot of roadway then that needs to be done at this theoretical project.
Yes, there is, yeah, that's right. The other part of the output page is the assessment of those comp plan goals. And so where there's alignment with those comp plan goals, there's sort of a green indication. When there's not alignment, that's red. And sort of an indication of, are we meeting some of these policy goals through this annexation or not? And so some of those relate to, are you using financial tools to help mitigate the impacts on the city? Are you creating places? Are you providing a more efficient land use pattern, or are you serving this area more efficiently? Are you creating opportunity for new employment, commercial development? Those are the types of different goals that are within that.
So a question on this theoretical project.
Yeah,
Since it's a negative impact fiscally,
yeah.
does that mean that our roadway impact fees, they're not sufficient for those particular roads around this theoretical project?
Just so you understand, she has her calculator out. So
Yeah, I do. Like, what is that? $462,000 a
It
year
means that
over 30 years.
this specific project will not fund the entire improvement that's related to that project. But like I said, there are potentially other annexations that would contribute to that. But yes, it's meant to show that the capital implications to the city are greater than what you're going to generate revenue for.
And so Mayor Pro Tem Holliday, at the beginning, you'd asked about like, what's the benefit of annexation? It is in each scenario, but in the scenarios that we ran, then there's a negative fiscal implication because of the amount of roads that need to be done. And then in this one, you can see here, doesn't only meets 2 of the 5 goals that we'd have set out for our 2040 vision. And so that's how we would weigh each one of those requests that come through.
and there's the hard part to this is that you can't quantify or take into consideration is the political aspect to this, because
Sure.
let's be frank. We got told years ago by our elected officials down at the ledge, go out there and start talking to people now, because it's only going to get harder to annex. And it's hard because now that we're looking back at what we're able to do and the limitations on what we can go about that as well, you look and say, okay, we made decisions that, hey, listen, okay, we're apprehensive. I mean, and maybe it's including myself, right, about what people will say if we're active for that, you know, and telling people, hey, listen, this is what we have as City of Pflugerville, non-annexation agreement, all those agreements that we have over here that we could use in the tool set. At the same time, I wouldn't be living in my house if not for, I always get my Trays. Trey Fletcher, okay, I have a Trey Apple in my life too as well. Wasn't told, go out there, go ahead and have those annexation agreements, do it out there, where I'm at, Verona and those other areas, and get those lands, because it's only going to get worse. And, you can understand, like, people who live in Village of Hidden Lakes, some other areas are like, wait a minute, how's this fair? That, like, he's all the way out here, and they get to vote on everything going on here. They get the police service. And fire, not fire, waste, physical waste too, which is something we warned them about, the price going up on that. I'll leave that alone. You get all these services in the city, and I'm not getting that. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, I still consider they're Pfluger-Williams, there's our citizens who complain about the response time from the sheriff's office is absolutely horrible. What can you do about that? And we just gotta say, I'm sorry, we're not there for that. So, and that's something I know you can't. I mean, I'm just putting it out there because I know you can't quantify that per se, but it's the part that's in the back of my head. I think one of the best things staff ever did was take Doug, myself, Jim. Who else was on that trip? Whenever we went to Prosper, McKinney, and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and we drove to that area in McKinney. We're like, man, this is great. They're like, yeah, this will never be a part of McKinney. And they're like, sorry, just because of everything going on with bonds, everything else, would never be a part of that. But it was very eye opening about being, and then we were at Prosper, and we also had Serena's friend who was like, yeah, we grabbed all this stuff because at some point we had this big city hall in the middle of a pasture. Yeah, but we know we're going to build around it.
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask, is this model going to be applied to every request for annexation from here on out?
So that's one of the benefits of this tool is that you have the math associated with it, which may not have been something that we've been able to present in the past. It isn't something that we've been able to provide. And so in this context, we'll be able to provide you with the other pieces, from the staff standpoint with regards to the comprehensive plan. Council will have its own policy decisions in looking at what is the land use, where is this located, what do you want, what do you see that's not quantifiable. But then this element of it is also another aspect of that toolbox to say, do we want to take this on or do we not?
So hopefully, Rudy, that eliminates the political piece and adds this scientific piece to it to say why we should say yes or no, why it'll be red or green.
We go back and say, hey, I'm sorry, this is what my flux capacitor is telling me.
Boom. Sorry.
Well, it's data, right? It's the more data. It's not anecdotal. We feel something that this will be. This will give us better information. Obviously, it's still an estimate. But to Rudy's point about the existing neighborhoods that are adjacent to city limits but are feel that they're part of the city but are actually not in the city limits, will this model also be able to be applied to them at the cost of annexing, whether we wanted to do whatever it is about the debt in the muds or whatever, or the feelings of the neighbors and whether they want those better services and what it would cost to us, and use that and for us to decide if we wanted it, and also if we did, how you would sell it.
I did think to your question, he did put a big asterisk that said that MUDs and other things were not contemplated.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
In this model.
Yeah, and we're about to get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
because I
jumping
think that was a
ahead. I
big
thought you were
part. Yeah, that was a big part of what I wanted to see in this model. Now, first of all, I'm worried that this is a bit myopic, in that if we're looking at here's city limits and way out here we're going to annex, yeah, obviously there's a dramatic amount of investment that's required in those roads to get out there. But if we're taking baby steps to get out there, then it would likely be more and more green on the screen, saying, hey, we should do that. But it ignores the concept that, hey, if we do this, it then incentivizes all the little pieces along the way. That's where we get the green.
The domino effect.
So
Well, then that
obviously,
has
if
to be
I'm
one of
looking
our
at something way
goals
out
that
there,
needs to be
this is going to tell me no. But we're going to need to have a better concept of what it means to get all the way out there to see if it makes sense.
One way I would look at it also is that it'll tell you from sort of a development program and pattern perspective that what the benefit is and what the impact would be. But it'll also give you an estimate of the cost to get out there. And then you can think about what are creative strategies to address that cost number. And so it's not necessarily it's negative. No, it's negative. How do we address that cost to be able to make that policy decision? And so I wouldn't want to think of it as necessarily a yes, no, black or white decision tool. It's one piece of information.
It's data.
Yeah.
It's data. It might be information, but it's not necessarily all the way to what we need to know to make the decision. Now, you mentioned you're going to move forward with some information about MUDs.
Yep.
In this, okay.
Yeah.
Before you go, I just wanted to point out and ask. So, based on what you two are saying and asking, will our staff look at this and say, well, there's only 2 green out of 5? No.
Obviously, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Or are you looking at it and saying, well, there's only 2 out of 5, but I think this has that potential, so let's go on ahead and allow it.
What I
Or-
heard Matthew say is
Open the
that it's
discussion.
getting to say yes. The question is that
Okay, I
for
heard him say that.
This is
that's
this
why I
is
wanted to ask that.
information to be part
Okay,
of
yeah.
the conversation.
So it's not a
that
hard no.
No, you're actually
make
making
sure.
an informed decision. So when you say that, if this was like something that we voted yes on, this is saying to everyone, we see that this cost is here, and it was actually part of our decision, and
Right.
and how are we going to address it so that current residents aren't experiencing this increased costs for this development. But it's better to go in with all the data than to be missing pieces.
better to have it and don't need it than need it and
Hold
don't have it.
My expectation is the results page here. So my expectation is the results page here is, the second page in our packet, right? It's part of the summary so that we have this information in order to make the annexation. This isn't going to preclude staff from bringing an annexation forward.
So it's part of the tools of all the things that we look at, whether it's the comprehensive plan or master planning. It's one of those efforts, and when we look at, like, the staff reports, has all of the pieces to it. This will be a component of that. This particular example reflects kind of what we talk about when we talk about leapfrog development. It is much more costly to the city in order to go from here out to here without those incremental baby steps along the way. Are there ways to get there? Yes, there are, but there's a cost to it if we don't do it thoughtfully. And so those are all of the elements that we'll need to take into consideration as they come to us. But going from A to Z in one step is incredibly costly to the community because of the amount of infrastructure costs related to those types of requests.
And I'll give the corollary to that. There's a cost to also not doing it. Because right now, as we were talking about before, is that 973 is being developed before our eyes. And, and I appreciate, PCDC looking out there, looking for land and trying to get that. That's a different but related conversation to this. But for us to have not been more proactive with those farmers, particularly those folks who have looked into, talked to them and said, hey, we're, 6th, 7th generation Pflugervillians. They may not be living in the city, but they consider themselves as such, and they're just waiting for it, as they put it, when are we getting out there toward that? That has a cost too. I don't think anyone would ever tell you, let's be honest, that's just business, right? That's how you run things in general. Like, you have to look at a cost-benefit analysis and how things occur. So, yeah, if you're going to go ahead and do something like that, well, here's the cost of it's going to happen then. You've got to take into consideration. And if you don't do that, well, this is what happens from there as well. So, I think this is great to have as a data point and not just necessarily, as a complete King's X on whatever we're doing one way or the other.
It's pieces of information
Who
to
can-
help us get to that answer. And I think to your point earlier about kind of where we went with, like, non-annexation development agreements, right? So much in legislation has changed
I know.
since then, which has really tied our hands in so many ways. And getting to maybe that person who thinks that they feel they're a Pflugervillian, even though they're, a good mile to outside our city limits, right? There's also 14 other property owners between them and us that we also have to get on board for that in order to make that happen. And that is on those property owners today versus when in 2012, when we could do those non-annexation development agreements, we didn't have the restrictions on our budget to expand our taxes and things like that in order to make those things feasible. Just really, it makes it more confining. So this, I think, will be a great tool for us to have in those considerations whenever they do come forward.
I think a conversation just to our citizens who are listening. Would you say you're either watching live or
On replay.
on replay? I like how she put it on replay right there. This is a conversation that's being had by cities across the state because there's a lot of cities, to be blunt, are not going to be able to reach their potential given the limitations that have happened from the legislature, and that's quite significant and honestly damaging to how city models are. Caesar, you said it in jest, but it's true. You talked about how counties are, supposed to be taking care of their roadways, but counties don't have the same revenue basis that we have. They don't have the same rights that we have and the abilities that they have. And they're not built to have wastewater and water treatment plants. They're not built to go ahead and do zoning and have these things, these plats out there. But because of de-annexation laws and other nonsense that's happening right now, that's being put on their doorstep. They don't have. I mean, the sheriff's offices are not police offices. They're not made to go ahead and go out there for those rapid services in these specific areas. And I think that the problem is that we're getting to a crescendo point, as what we saw with Round Rock and Hutto in that de-annexed area last year. Yeah, it was last year with that wastewater treatment plant where it's no man's land. And people are going to be wondering, well, who the heck do I call? And how do I get what I have over here? And we're like, well, we can't afford to have you. The county's saying, well, we can't afford to pay for that going over here. So what do you do?
Well, the more things that happen this way, then you can advocate at the state. when they, I mean, they've reversed decisions
Bless
on other
your heart.
things.
Bless your heart.
She really believes that, doesn't she?
She's new. It's okay.
No, there are laws on other things where they've changed how something would, not necessarily in this, but the more data you have, the more situations that have, then that's what you have to bring forward to advocate.
You are really telling me the state legislature of Texas looks at data as a forefront of what their analysis?
Can we move on to the
Okay.
next section?
Anyway, data's always good.
presentation.
To that point, one of the things that they looked at were these service areas.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So one of the items of your comprehensive plan was to try to establish sort of a flexible urban services area, and so this study helps advance that idea. And we identified, working with staff, these municipal service areas that give you a sense of which areas are harder to serve for new development based on the presence of roadways.
That's cool.
Your water and wastewater service areas, treatment sheds, and then obviously proximity to existing and planned development. And so we sort of numbered those based kind of on the level of difficulty to provide services within those.
One the hardest and one the easiest.
One's the there's
I know it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
in quotes. It's in quotes. It's cool.
And we also identified, just sort of pick 6 different prototypical sites and develop some different development programs within those to test, just all single family and industrial development and mixed use development that has some commercial, some residential, to look at what the implications are of different land use programs and different locations within the ETJ, within these service areas. And so using those different scenarios, we came with these sort of major findings. So, the first one sort of the kind of the closer you are to existing city infrastructure and services, the less impactful it is. Really the biggest finding was the impacts of taking over county roads and upgrading and maintaining those to a certain level of service, as well as ultimately upgrading those to what's called for in your transportation plans, is really the biggest implication that we found. And that's more on that sort of capital side of the equation. And so when we looked at different scenarios in terms of different locations, the cost to provide services as well as really taking over and extending infrastructure to areas that are further out in the ETJ, perhaps along FM 973. Currently, the costs outweigh the benefits of those. And so to our sort of prior discussion, figuring out ways to offset those costs are really the challenge you have to try to take advantage of perhaps that opportunity. We also did some assessment of some of those existing special districts that are developed. And what we realized is that the tool can only take you so far. It can tell you sort of the implication of the ongoing impacts of the housing or services are within that. And so the model allows you to compare the existing level of property tax it generates versus the ongoing services you have, and gives you a sense of what those implications are. It also estimates the INS portion of your property tax that's generated, and you can use that to compare to the MUD debt that you would have to take over if you were to annex that.
Cool.
But beyond that, there is a whole lot of additional analysis that's needed for each MUD area that needs to be factored in, and that's the existing infrastructure that exists, what quality and standard that's built to, what improvements are needed to bring that up to city standards, what sort of park and open space infrastructure exists, and how much cost that would relate to. And so that specific analysis on all those the different potential MUDs that exist was not part of our scope and would be a much bigger, broader effort. And so this tool can evaluate sort of those sort of ongoing impacts of the existing development, but additional analysis is needed to really truly vet. I think one rule of thumb we developed from that was if the MUD debt that's outstanding, the annual payment on that MUD debt is greater than what you're generating in your INS property tax, it probably is not sort of a non-starter to even consider that. And so if the MUD debt's small enough, maybe there's the potential for starting to evaluate those additional impacts and see if that makes sense. But there are definitely existing MUDs that have debt that's beyond what you would generate in an INS, and that starts to become a real financial burden.
And that's what makes Village at Hidden Lakes interesting. At least it did a couple years ago because we were at that point where it was like.
Well,
So do we have
we're at a point. Oh, go
that?
ahead.
Sorry. So do we have at least that? Here's the initial, the initial analysis outside of those additional things that would, like, which ones are non-starters at this point in time based on their debt, and which ones are potentials that may be worth exploring further if there's a desire. Like,
The model pretty easily we have inventoried all the debt of all those MUDs, and the model can pretty easily.
As of when?
When did we pull it? So it was last year. Yeah, I think through 2023.
So we couldn't. Well, I say we couldn't. I don't want to make assumptions in my question. Should there be a significant variance between that number denoted right then to what it is now?
I mean, what you're looking at is what the
Okay.
annual repayment amount is, and
Okay.
I suspect those are pretty consistent.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So some policy recommendations based on the modeling. So
I thought the MUDs, that was very interesting. Doug, and how many years ago did we talk about in-city MUDs?
We've been talking about it for years. I mean, Falcon Point's been there for 20 years now.
And remember how the conversation went to, we're apprehensive about in-city MUDs because then people keep coming back to us and saying, I'm paying you all this stuff. We're like, no, you're actually paying your MUD district. That's not us. But it was interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, no, obviously I prefer in-city MUDs over out-of-city MUDs. I prefer PIDs over MUDs. But I would much rather us be able to develop without any of those special districts.
Well, we had the member of Carmel conversation.
Carmel, yeah, we've got what, 2/3 of Carmel is in city and
And the
1/3
other
not.
one, yeah. And
It's about 50-50.
That was at 50-50 now.
yeah,
Okay.
that was a very interesting
awkward.
pitch by them.
So my concern
You're in the city,
and
but you're
not to hurl insults or anything, but I don't think this model is matching my expectations of what we were going to accomplish, because my expectation was exactly to the point of something like Village of Hidden Lake or Avalon or Sorrento or any of the Blackhawks or West Creek, Reserve at West Creek, that I would be able to understand, does it make sense to annex these areas that are currently in a MUD? And probably not now, but is there a point in the future when it does? I don't think it's as simple, because right now we see Hidden Lake having a total tax rate. Their MUD is a tax rate that's less than the city's now.
Yeah.
Most of the others, I think we've got some of those MUDs at 90 cents or higher in those extraterritorial jurisdictions. But really, does that tax rate need to get below our INS rate? Or is there a calculation that we can implement that provides us with a date certain when the revenue that we would receive from those current MUD areas that to be annexed outweigh the cost that they incur to the city? That's really the calculation I'm looking for, because the outline areas, it's kind of common sense that, the further out I go, the more expensive it's going to be on city services. But those areas that are adjacent to the city, those are the ones that I need to know when it's appropriate to annex.
And those are
And am I going to be able to
And
figure that out from this model?
I think there's elements of that, but also ensuring that, again, those are property owners within there have to agree to be annexed.
True.
We want to be 100% of the property owners would have to agree to annexation. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that we understand.
Wait,
How-
100%?
No.
More than 50%.
I'm sorry, more than 50%.
50% have to petition.
Oh, I was like, what? Okay,
Or
I
a
would get
certain number can
100%.
petition for an
every other
election.
house
Well,
has to agree to yes.
So with
Yeah.
MUDs, it's a little different. So it,
And the debt, I want to get to that.
Yeah.
yeah, with, so
Right.
yeah, so with MUDs, annexation provisions would have to be in the if we have a
If we have a specific.
if we have a development agreement,
Yeah.
312, 172 agreement. If we don't, then we cannot annex a MUD except through a SPA, and which would have to be negotiated with us and the board of the MUD. And then other than that, I don't think, I'd have to look, I'd have to double check, but I don't think there's any other way to annex a MUD except through those two processes, but I'll double check.
But again, that's information, the cost information as well as the process is part of the whole decision making,
existing
you know,
debt.
the decision tree of whether, what is possible now, or, you know, short term, long term, or at what date certain would it be? But I think having that information at least, you know, like, well, this debt is, so, you know, we're looking at 20 years. These are kinds of things that we can discuss as policy. We could also, you know, be given this giving this information to the public so that they really understand why these, you know, why someone is part of the city or not part of the city.
Right.
So we keep up
Yeah.
with that, and I can't remember the latest, 9 years or so for Village of Hidden Lakes is whenever their debt may be finished.
Right.
So that's the
Yeah, it depends.
earliest,
Right.
would be 9
Right.
years.
But there's a calculation there. If their
Yeah.
debt is fully paid off in 9 years, it may make sense in 4 years to go out there and say, hey, you know what, your debt isn't paid off yet, but it's better for you to refinance it as city debt than and start collecting that revenue and start providing those services. Because I know those folks, they want library cards, they want police service, they want our officers responding.
It's just
Right.
at what cost
But
will the
Yeah.
city
but
pay
there
that?
Yeah, exactly.
and there may be a number before that debt is paid off when it makes sense. And that's the date certain that I'm looking for.
And we can certainly.
Or it may not make sense even after the debt is paid
So
off,
what we
and that
do
would
in
be
that-
useful to know as well.
In that scenario, we would calculate, you have to make some guesses on what their appraisal, what their, you know, you would, to me, that one's pretty simple. The road's already laid, et cetera, and we can take a look at
Yeah,
how much
those
money
roads
will
need to
they-
get fixed.
And I was gonna say, and to fix roads. So we can run this similar model and just take in the revenue of what we expect those houses to produce and figure out when that would make sense.
When
I
it
think
makes
the-
sense to the city and when it makes sense to the
I think the
citizens in
big
that area.
hurdle isn't us giving you a number. It's gonna be whether or not you can annex.
Yeah. Well, I want to know both. I want to know what would it cost, or, you know, at what point in time would it be feasible? And then can we do it? And if we can, under what scenarios?
What property are you asking for that information?
Well, I mean, I want to know all of the people who think that they're part of Pflugerville, everyone that has, you know, like all the ones that are adjacent. And, you know, out.
I don't want to run that model until council asks me to do that, just from the
Yeah.
time and effort and energy.
Oh, I'm just saying, I'd like to know.
I think I'm assuming, and maybe Melody is as well, that using this model makes that calculation much more simple.
It's easier.
It's no longer a 3-week effort to figure that out for one neighborhood. It should be a couple hours.
Maybe.
I don't know how.
I think that the MUD debt, all of those components are going to be, it's a separate piece that we will have to generate and look at all of those aspects. But the model itself gives us the basis, whether it's in a MUD or it's not, it's the subdivision and what's the infrastructure needed and that kind of thing that this model will generate. So that's one part of it. The rest of it is additional information that we have to take.
So that's where this model is falling short of my expectations, because I expected that to be part of the model, not something in addition.
I think that there's a lot of variables in there when we were having those conversations to figure out how do we build something that could be applied to every aspect, because there are so many different pieces there that I think that's where we stopped and said, I think we can use this model to generate what is the subdivision, what does it create, and what's the revenues and those types of things. But then these other aspects are something that we have to look on a case by case basis, because there's too many variables that are in there to add it to one. You know, essentially it's an Excel sheet that's going to have all of these different if thens in it that we have to say yes or no and factor in what could be all of those pieces. So.
I think it's important data. When I look at this, I think you mentioned the neighborhoods and the improved values being worked in there. My expectation is that 973, as we get out there, as we get along what will likely be the next major arterial in the region, I'm looking at these top 10 taxpayers in Pflugerville that we got from our prior conversation, and two of them are right there along Stonehill. Right, they're the apartments that go along with that. My expectation is that there will be another Stonehill style development out there. There will be another concentration in that area, and that concentration is what makes it viable, not necessarily just a little bit of additional residential of subdivision out there and along the way. That's my goal in theory, getting out to 973. And I think we need to definitely have a long-term vision for what the city looks like and find a way to make those decisions. I'm not finding this to be particularly helpful at this point. Hopefully you can prove me wrong in the future.
May I ask, Councilmember Weiss, you don't mean separate? In other words, you would actually, we understand that the building of those would be better suited financially within the city limits today. And you're saying we keep doing that and.
But that's, of course,
Okay.
we keep developing within city limits, but we're also seeing dramatic economic pressures along 973, bookmarked by Samsung and all the development going on with that, all the way down 973 into Manor and then further to the south to the Tesla factory. My expectation is that there will be another major corridor. And if we're not providing those services, I don't know who is. But I do believe that it would be beneficial when I read about the founding of Pflugerville. It's about giving people a place to belong and to thrive, and that's what I would expect that we provide in those areas. I expect it to be mutually beneficial to the citizens who come to live in those areas and the economic development that goes along with the development.
And Mr. Wise, to your point, and I appreciate you saying that, and I see that vision as well. But I think what we're talking here today is that along 973, those communities, whether it's Hutto, Manor, Taylor, whoever, are still going to have the same kind of financial challenges we're having today. So
These areas are currently in our ETJ.
How about a next step could be, do you want us to just test a model, like a Village of Hidden Lakes, or do you want us to test, what would help y'all?
I would love to start with one is great. I'm just saying my vision is I want the information for all the neighborhoods that are already existing there, in our ETJ that aren't, that are already built out. But starting with one is great.
So I'm just going to ask, because I really want to understand the policy direction. And why are we looking at neighborhoods?
Right.
Like, what is the
I want to
purpose?
understand if there is an ROI on the neighborhood. So I
Okay,
think we've
we
heard
run that pretty quick.
we've heard pretty frequently
I think there's going to
that
be not. I mean, we can run it on residential, and I'll sure we can do that.
we've got high density and adjacency. I think it's important for us to run that model and see. I frequently hear that residents don't pay for themselves, but
We'll
with
show it in
the
the
housing
numbers.
values that we're seeing in some of these areas, I think it's worthwhile to do that calculation.
I'll grab Village of Hidden Lakes just as a.
That-
We
that I
have a
think-
few. Are there other? I think Avalon's older than the Hidden Lakes, isn't it?
No.
No.
No, and
Village is-
Hidden Lake
Thought it
is
was older.
is
Or whichever.
the lowest debt.
Yeah.
Blackhawk.
that would be
Is
the
it the
least
lowest
complicated.
Okay.
The
villages
least
in it.
complex, you've got, we've got a geographical area.
Okay. Something like that.
Yeah, those
The
lakefront
complicated may
lots
be
should
the
very
mud
valuable.
and the lack of a spa, and there's
Yeah.
gonna be, and then the question, could you get 50% of people to not want to shoot off their fireworks?
Fireworks are already prohibited in that area.
No, that's what I'm saying.
They're already prohibited in that area. Within 5,000 feet of city limits, according to our ordinance. And state law.
Yeah, is it 50%
Technically.
of the residents or 50% of who shows up to vote?
51 of property owners.
We're gonna need
Okay.
Charlie to weigh in on
I just
that,
wanted
because
to-
there's a
But the
threshold
mud
for an
is-
election and a threshold for a petition
And a strategic partnership agreement.
and
Sure.
SPAs.
So, sort of close the loop, sort of to your point, council member. This process has helped create these municipal service areas that you can use for future planning. It's the realization that you're gonna have to use MUDs or PIDs or other public financing tools to try to address these costs of annexation. The municipal service areas sort of provide you somewhat of the direction of what a path could be to 973, and that sort of the areas that are easier or less costly or impactful to annex are likely the ones where there's more likely a path that you could try to address that. And so more, looking at this map, I think annexation or municipal service area 4 perhaps presents that opportunity of moving that way, just based on where your infrastructure is planned or exists currently. And so that can start to be the basis of a plan to go out there. And then lastly, the model and the study has helped set up sort of a consistent methodology that you all can use to evaluate annexation requests. And so we'll give you the parameters of how to look at costs and revenues over 30 years, the major factors from a capital improvement that you need to address, and as well as the comprehensive goals that are related to annexation. And so really furthering the comp plan to help you have a better tool and process for evaluation requests. And with that, I'll let Jeremy sort of wrap.
So thank you for the opportunity to be able to have this conversation. We appreciate it, and we'll take the feedback. Our intent was to then receive this feedback and come back to you all with that plan wrapped up later in August. So thank you.
Awesome. Are there some next steps for us here today?
No, just
Just a
presentation.
robust conversation.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right. Looks like we have time. Do we have time? We're gonna move on to, agenda item 2C, discussion regarding fiscal year 26 budget preparations and budget assumptions for utility funds and master fee schedule recommendations. We have Tracy, our finance director, and,
Anybody else that might want to
okay,
present?
all right. And Tracy.
Figured we'd keep him from having to go back and forth if he's just up here. He can- So, good evening. This is our second budget work session for fiscal 2026. And the agenda here tonight is to talk about utility rates, the utility fund budget assumptions, the utility debt service, and then the second half of the presentation is all of the fee recommendations for the master fee schedule, which is why Shane was up here and then.
We only have 30 minutes.
Because he can't wait to talk about fees.
I'm saying that out loud to some. We only have 30 minutes.
Yeah, so utility funds, just a recap of what those are: water, wastewater fund, solid waste fund, utility capital fund, and debt service. Just to point out that debt service does actually live in the water, wastewater fund. It's not a separate fund. Water, wastewater rate update. So we've been looking at the rate model every single year. Want to make sure that we have the most accurate data in that model. We update the units, we look at the growth projections. Just to point out on a 2%, it's not growth in population, it's growth in units. And so it may be a different percentage than you might see from the planning department on growth. We have updated the projected annual debt payments and have also considered how impact fees can affect the rates. So this is a comparison. Every year we will present, this is what we stepped out with last year, this is what we're stepping out with this year based on the updated rate model. So you can see that For fiscal '26, a 5/8 inch base fee. We stepped out last year at 55.5. This year we're saying 50. So that's kind of what that comparison means, is that we're projecting a little bit lower this year on each one of these fees. The biggest change in the projection is the fact that we are seeing an uptick in impact fees, which means we can start utilizing some of those impact fees to try to control the rates a little bit, and also just the slower rollout of the debt. And so as that debt gets pushed out in years in the model, obviously that affects the rates as well. These are the base fees. The next slide is the volumetric rates, but I'll not switch it if y'all are good to
Well, I'm
go.
happy to see
Yes, we're
the future ones.
attempting to,
Yeah,
Yes.
slowing the growth
I think I
is
started
nice, but
breathing.
I'd rather see it hold steady.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, later on in the presentation, you'll see why that can't be possible. The volumetric fees, we've also adjusted those accordingly. So, like I say, every single year we'll continue to update the data and update those projections. Here is on the wastewater side, not as many changes to what we stepped out with last year because these rates still hold true on the wastewater side. So in the outer years, we may see a little bit less, but we've also included a wastewater wholesale rate forecast. Right now, we're at 50.73, but we are projecting to go up to 57.75, and then projections in the outer years. Do want to point out that we're also working on a wholesale water rate. That is not something that's currently in our master fee schedule, but it is a rate that we need to go ahead and have and adopt. So that calculation is being done right now.
Will you please remind me what is the wastewater wholesale rate for? Who is that for?
So the wholesale wastewater
Reclaimed
rate is
water?
for, so we have a wholesale agreements with all of the Blackhawk MUDs. So all
Okay.
of the, there's 7 of those that have a wholesale
their
agreement with
water,
us. We don't
their
perform the
wastewater.
retail services for them.
They pay us to take it.
Okay.
So it's important for us to keep those agreements up to date as well. This is just a snapshot, just again comparing a residential bill from the forecast last year to the forecast this year. So as you can see, we're trying to lower and flatten it out a little bit. On the flip side, a commercial bill, same thing. We are looking at a little bit less of an increase on the commercial side. Benchmarking on residential rates, these are the same jurisdictions we had in our presentation last year. We did add a total utility bill column, and that just takes into consideration other fees, for instance, a drainage fee, solid waste fee. So that's why, we have 2 different columns there, but
Yikes. Round 98. Okay, now I'm understanding why all the stuff I see on social media. 234 compared to a few that are closer to the 100.
we always want to preface this benchmark by saying all of these communities could be like we're building our plants right now. We're at a very different place than maybe Cedar Park, who is built out or close to built out. So just want to make sure that we keep that in mind.
So does that mean that you think it could go down? The future ones were built out?
A few years out, yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
How far?
I mean, the
10,
debt,
15?
yeah, the debt is laid out for 30 years. So
Or that other communities still have more to build. So places like Georgetown have a $1.98 billion 5-year water wastewater CIP.
They're about to.
So they're about to be, we're a few years ahead of them
Gotcha.
in capital, as opposed to they're building a significant amount for the next 5 years. That will impact their rates as well.
What about Round Rock, since they are adjacent?
Round Rock built the majority of their infrastructure in the late 90s, early 2000s. So the biggest capital projects that they have are with regional partnerships. So with their water side is partnered with Cedar Park, Leander, through the BCRUA facility. And their wastewater treatment and conveyance is generally the same, where they share ownership of their water and wastewater treatment facilities because of their proximity to those neighbors, and they're within the same river basin. Our closest river basin neighbor is the city of Austin.
Thank you for the context.
Yeah, no
It's
worries.
important.
That's why he's here.
Yes, because you have to be able to explain it to people who are very angry at their monthly bill.
So on the budget assumptions for the wastewater and wastewater funds, there are 14 new positions added in the fiscal 26. Not all of them are funded for the full year, but we are starting to ramp up for the new facilities that will be coming online at the end of 2026. Same as the general fund, 3% base compensation increase, and we've factored in the 5% health insurance costs. This fund balance policy is a 25% reserve. So looking at year over year, the utility fund in fiscal 25 budgeted 56.1. Our projections are coming in below that. A big piece of that is the debt expense. Just want to point out, we've talked about the WIFIA funding before, but the WIFIA amortization schedules are very different, and they depend on when we draw the funds down. And we started drawing the WIFIA funds down later than the model originally projected, which means we had some debt service savings. But everything that we collect in this fund will be put either to cash fund infrastructure or to put towards debt. I mean, like, all of it will be applied to something. And so just want to make sure that there's an understanding there. So we are looking at 63.6 million as a fiscal 26 proposed expenditure.
Why is it so much larger than the projected for this year? 31%.
Debt service.
Okay.
And 14 new people. I mean, so a combination of, those are like the big drivers, as more personnel and the debt service. So you lead me into my next slide.
All right.
So debt service, this is the principal and interest, or the water and wastewater principal and interest payments as they are projected out through fiscal 2030. And you can see, I mean, we are at about 22 million this year. By 27, it will be double, and by 29, it will be triple. I mean, so this is what's driving the rates.
Do you have information about our projection of new homes that are going to come online to share in that cost?
So it's all built into the model. That growth projection that we've built into the model, all of those things are factored into the model to help us see what those rates need to be. All of this debt has been built into the model.
No, I was just wondering if there's a presentation of what that we can see. Okay, here's the the debt is going up. What is, to also see what's the new households, right? Not people. But
I mean,
I would like to see that.
can provide the units that are
Yeah.
being added in the model. I don't have that on me right this second, but yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
I think in general, it's about 400 a year. It's kind of the estimate in the model. So there are some capital outlay equipment and infrastructure requests in this budget, and these would be cash funded out of available fund balance, and so it's approximately $1.6 million in these requests. And then we also have very specific requests as it relates to the new Wilbarger wastewater treatment plant, which is a little less than $1 million.
Are these cash funded also?
Yes, so all of these are considered out of available fund balance.
So can you explain the reasons, or can we use the fund balance to reduce the increase in fees, because basically the fund balance is higher water fees paid in the past than expenses. So can we use that to not
So-
increase rates?
No, so when we are required to have certain debt coverage, that is based on current year revenue over current year expenditures, and it cannot be, fund balance cannot be considered in that equation. And so if we were to reduce the revenue, we would not be meeting our debt coverage. What we can do is use fund balance to cash fund purchases. We can use it to pay down debt, but we just can't use it in the calculation of the debt coverage.
Because it seems like our rates, the expenses were now going to be $8 million less than what we budgeted. But we can, so we've collected $8 million more than what we needed to this year. And so we're just.
But if we didn't do that, our rate, so we're increasing like this, if we didn't do that, you see the jumps in the debt payments, they're huge. So we have to go ahead and start applying those rate increases now in order to be where we need to be when we hit our maximum debt payments out
So-
in 29.
Can we use then some of those fees? You said we could use it to pay our debt
We
instead
can use
of.
it to pay debt, and we can use it to cash fund other things. What we can't do is not increase the rates because we can't meet our debt coverage. So getting loans from the Texas Water Development Board and the EDA and the WIFIA funding, those are great, and we do see savings in doing those types of loans. They also come with a lot of requirements, and one of those requirements is a pretty high debt coverage that we have to proof up and we have to maintain.
Okay.
So, but all the funds within the Water Wastewater Fund, the Water Capital Fund, all of those funds are considered for all of those purchases. So we look at all of those funds in total.
So will we have funds above the 25% that are not used for these capital outlay that could be used to reduce debt? So that we don't have to perhaps increase rates so much in the future?
I still have to show on paper that I bring in enough revenue to cover the operating expenditures and a certain level of debt.
I think the question is how much excess fund balance will remain after these cash funded expenditures?
I think I was still showing about 37%.
And in dollars, what is that?
No, you know what?
Because I know we've got at least 8 million, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So right now, but we have another little twist because we do have to have a bond reserve with our Texas Water Development Board debt. So that has to be set aside. That's like almost $6 million that we have to set aside. So the ending fund balance after 2026 is about 29, but 6 million of that
Okay.
has to be reserved.
So about 23 million that we could use to cash fund capital projects?
Well, but part of that is your 25%, so you wouldn't want to. Go,
I'm sorry, I thought that was
You can't
excess.
go. No. That's
No, okay.
That's
So
total.
so outside of the bond covenants and the minimum fund balance requirements, how much excess fund balance do we hold?
I can get that to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that I imagine is the number that then we can use to cash fund capital improvements and hopefully
Well, and we
keep some
can-
of these rates more in check.
Correct. So we are projecting future debt issuances. That's part of the rate. If we have cash to do some of those improvements, that we don't have to issue that debt. That's where it plays in. That's really the only way we're able to turn that around.
So your
Absolutely,
excess
absolutely, and it's a
cash,
small amount.
Is connected to the debt, or the rates, is what I'm hearing. So the less you have, your rates are gonna be cattywampus.
I don't know if I'm following you, but I think you understand. If we have the cash, then we will use the cash and we will not sell the debt, which means our total debt payments would be estimated lower. And that's really the only way we can affect the rates.
Yeah. It was just between those two, we're talking about $2.5 million in capital outlay, which is, I don't know how that compares to our capital outlay in the past, but it seems like a lot of capital outlay. Just wondering, do we need all of this in 1 year? And then the other question I had on your previous slide about the 14 new positions, are all of those related to the new facility?
Those are.
Right.
Okay. And the new facility, though, is not going to open this next fiscal year. Is it going to open before September 30th of 26?
Talked about the budget.
It will be receiving wastewater in September 26th.
Okay, so then you have to hire some of them however many months ahead.
Correct.
They have to be trained.
So are all, yeah,
Trained.
sure. I was just wondering how many of, you said some of them are partial use.
I think we put in April first.
We prorated it.
So we did like
Okay.
a 6-month.
So are all
some
of
of
those
them.
14 starting halfway?
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
So the facility will have a supervisor that will want to bring on first, so that way they're going to hire their staff accordingly. So they're a little further up, but then the rest are, some of the other ones are prorated further back into those.
Okay. So there's a lower annual cost this first year, and then
Correct.
there won't be a full year. I'm assuming you'll provide that information when you guys have more details. Okay, thank you.
So the other fund is the solid waste, and really there's not a whole lot in this fund. It's where we track our third-party solid waste contract. The big takeaway is there's no increase in customer rates this year. And then we start into the master fees.
Oh, look, 14 minutes.
Kick off the planning department.
He's right here.
He's back.
Sorry.
So we'll just go as far as we can go.
You want to go through each one?
Quickly, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Yasmin Turk, Planning Manager. The first new fee that we have is for the zoning notification after postponement. And the next.
The next few will be me. For the license agreement, we're increasing that to from 500 to 750. That's based on doing some analysis of what's around the area as well as the time that's spent from our team. The permit extension request, this is specific to construction, public improvements. That would be $1,000 if they request to have that permit extended by 6 months, which our code allows. And then overall, we did some more breakdown on the site disturbance permits. This is pretty consistent with what others are doing in the area. So it's kind of getting at the different acreages from 5 to 10, and then the newest one would be for floodplain reclamation. Today, that permit's very onerous. It's very, there's a lot of detail related to that. And so there's a new fee added for that just based on the time that's spent on that. And then the disturbance permit inspection fee did not exist in the last master fee schedule, and we're proposing that there be one this year.
I have a question on the first one. Could you explain a little bit more about what that means, zoning notification after postponement?
Sure. So this is just a fee that would recover additional costs of re-notifying the public and updating records when a zoning case is delayed or rescheduled on the request of the applicant. So we're required to do notifications. If for some reason we go through that process and then the applicant requests a delay, we want to be able to recover the fees in order to do that once again.
So I'm hearing with all of these increases, it's to cover either staff time or or expenses like postage, so that it's a more of a cost recovery for the city.
For this one, yes.
And for
That's consistent, yes, ma'am.
yeah, thank you.
This is for a vacation of an easement. Today it's a $250 permit to request that the city vacate an easement. It takes a decent amount of time, and there's usually a legal associated with that, so we're just adding the addition of legal. And then the same for the roadway impact fee credit. Last year there was a fee added for $500 for a permit fee. That's really a credit that a developer is owed if they build a public improvement that's in our roadway impact fee study. And so instead of having a fee, we're just going to recoup the legal fees that are associated with that because there's often a lot of back and forth on that. And then the professional services fee. I went through a lot of cities in our area, and this is a fee that a lot of them added last year. Basically, it's anything that you don't have staff for. And then that cost would be billed to the developer themselves at the cost that's utilized. Some of the consultants that we use would be like traffic impact analysis reviews, additional professional services that just aren't accommodated that we don't have skilled staff for.
And for the site registration fee for food trucks, we're looking at the process that we use. And currently what we've been using is temporary use permits, which do not, are not meant to be long-term. So we're looking at something that would kind of streamline the process, and that would be a site registration fee.
Now, at the TML legislative summary, they were talking about food trucks and the licensing fees between the different jurisdictions. So if we factor that in as far as, it was kind of like whoever charges them first was, I don't know if that seemed to be.
This is related to the site. It's not related to the food truck itself or the health permitting or anything like that. This is specifically to make sure the zoning is appropriate, that it is safe, that it is not too close to a building, there aren't hazards. So this is from the this is a planning fee to make sure that it's an appropriate location.
So this is when a food truck parks on a lot.
Correct.
And they're going to be there for a while.
Correct.
Not that they're just moving around and parking
Right.
at a site for the day.
We have a different permit that's appropriate for a short-term 72-hour event type permitting. This is for a more long-term, this is a food truck that wants to be in one location for a year, for example.
Okay.
Is this per year or is it a
Per
one-time
year.
fee? Okay.
Per year.
Per year.
And then the next one is for annexation, and this is also a cost recovery fee that would ensure that the city of Pflugerville recovers administrative, legal, planning costs associated with reviewing and implementing annexation requests. We also have a de-annexation fee, which we did not previously have either. And this also makes sure that we have all the costs that come along with processing and evaluating a de-annexation request. Also, you notice this is a higher fee than the annexation fee, just in line with kind of the direction of council on how we're processing the applications, that it would take a little bit more to process that de-annexation request.
Do we receive many of those?
For de-annexation, we received in the past 12 months 15 de-annexation requests. So yes, we do receive quite a few of those.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this ETJ release fees or
De-annexation.
so from the city limits?
From the ETJ.
From the ETJ. So I think I prefer we rename it ETJ release fee because that's really what it is. The de-annexation implies disannexation from the jurisdictional limits of the city. So this is really a fee for if someone applies to be released from the city's ETJ. And that this fee makes sense. I recommend all my clients that they do this because there's a cost associated with it. But that's what this is. So I would suggest renaming it so it's not confusing because I was confused.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I didn't realize anyone. Okay, thank you.
This next one is just a clarification of an existing fee that we have. When you do work without a permit, we just charge you double the applicable fee permit. It was a little bit unclear in the previous master fee schedule.
Is that intended to be punitive or is that indicative of the cost associated?
It's meant to be punitive.
So the next set are all mine. They're all water meter installations. This is for new builds. This is to recover costs for the meter and the installation costs for staff time. This is a cost of service to cover our entire costs of all of our meter sizes that we install ourselves.
Single-family dwelling, going up from 32 cents a square foot to 40, and then also increasing for the single trades, each $20 each per dwelling, and same on duplex, also increasing from 37 cents to 42 cents, and $80 per trade per unit.
When is the last time those fees were updated?
2019.
Okay. It seems pretty dramatic, increasing by a third many of those trade fees, and then what is that, 25% on the single family? Is that indicative of the cost associated?
Additional cost recovery is.
And we look at comparison cities and see where we are in line as well.
We fall pretty much in line with
It's
all the
middle.
other local jurisdictions. We have the data on that. I think the only thing we're higher on would be individual trade fees on commercial, and finish outs in general for commercial as well. Townhomes as well going up from 50 cents to 60, and the trade fees are going, 80 across the board on all, for both on the residential. Hotels, let's see, we have separated apartments. Before we were capturing the hotels and apartments under the same fee structure. We've now taken out apartments that got their own fee structure, and this is all brand new. $1,400 flat fee, 20 cents a square foot, and then $60 per unit.
Can you remind me, what does the service fee cover on the trades?
All inspections.
Okay, so inspections of that work.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
New and finish outs, there's a graduated scale based on square footage, and we're only amending the smaller square footage, which would be 2,500 square feet. 0 to 2,500 square feet stayed the same. We're increasing the next two tiers for both of these a little bit, from 1,000 to 1,200, and then greater than 5,000, 12 from 1,000 to 1,200, and then increasing the square footage thereafter after 5,000 square feet. Same thing for the trades on that one.
So on the trades, if you have an exception on an inspection and the inspector has to come back, that's still part of the same $80 fee or whatever you charge?
Correct. On inspections, you get pretty much 2 inspections for free if it's the same inspection. A lot of these multifamily, and especially like the Baylor Scott and White, probably done upwards of 250 inspections there, because they call us in multiple times for the same inspection for different phases or different portions of the building. They don't do all the electrical on one floor and call us in one time. We may do 20 inspections on that one floor for the same thing. Now, in both residential and commercial, if you fail something, an inspection twice, then we're going to start charging you to come back and re-inspect at that point. If you fail the same inspection twice, you've got to come back the third time and thereafter. But that rarely happens on the commercial side. It's more partial inspections. Like Amazon probably took upwards of 600 to 700 inspections in lots of different phases.
How is that charged then? Like each inspection or?
No,
like,
it was
or each
the
phase?
fee, if we go back one
Sorry.
slide, for that particular project, back one more. So, no, forward, I'm sorry. Where did it go? Back
This one?
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, based on square footage,
Oh, okay.
it would have been $1,000 flat fee, and then you subtract 5,000 off the total square footage, and then you charge 3 cents a square foot. So it's one flat fee at the very beginning. And could have done upwards of 1,000 inspections, the fee would have been the
Flat
same.
fee.
Just depends.
All right.
Temporary certificate of occupancy. First certificate of temporary certificate of occupancy is $100. Your first renewal, and that's good for 30 days. Your second renewal is $500. Unfortunately, we're having issues with this kind of being abused. Right now, after your second one and thereafter, it's $500 every 30 days. But we're having projects stagnating on this TCO, and they've gotten upwards of 8 to 12 in some cases at $500.
Let's take a
I'm gonna
pause.
take a pause
We're
because it's
just gonna
6:59.
adjourn this.
I'm gonna
thing.
adjourn our work session and we'll be back in like 7 minutes.
Okay.
I called it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what?
Welcome to Pflugerville Focus. Coming up, proclamations at City Council, new AC system at the library, police drone purchase, Deutschenfest, and much more coming up on this edition.
Mayor Gonzalez presented several meaningful proclamations at the most recent City Council meeting.
I don't think so.
If I could collect everybody,
10, and so
we have 2 council members missing, so I think we're all here. So I would like to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City of Pflugerville City Council at 7:07. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honoring the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. And at this time, I know we always have a moment of silence, and I would just like to make a special comment that you join this evening in a moment of silence and prayer, if you wish, for all the families that were struck by the Hill Country floods and the loss of loved ones that we continue to see online and social media. It's a very painful time for them, so let's address that with a moment of silence. You may be seated. Our next item is public comment, and Ms. City Secretary, we have no one wishing to make public comment, so we will move on to presentation. I have a proclamation this evening for the Parks and Recreation Department and employees. Excuse me. Parks and Recreation improve the physical and mental health of people who live near parks of communities throughout our country. Parks and Recreation encourage physical activity by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. The City of Pflugerville boasts more public trails per capita than any other city in the state, with 1.49 miles per 2,000 residents. Pflugerville offers an expansive trail network that provides the community and visitors with ample opportunities for exercise, recreation, and social connection. I proclaim July 2025 as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Pflugerville, and we have members of the Parks and Recreation Department here to receive that proclamation, along with Shane.
All right. One more. Thank you so much.
Okay. And so that leads us to our next item with Parks and Recreation. Mr. Mize.
Sorry, I had to get my energy. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council, Park and Rec fans. Who we are. So we're a department of 45 full-time, 17 part-time, and 100 plus seasonal staff that provide quality of life, hyper-focused on providing quality of life for the residents of Pflugerville and the surrounding community. It says award-winning there. Very proud to brag on this team this year. Won an award for our goat maintenance program. I think it was just that we didn't kill any of them the last flood. Won an award for our master plan. It won the state award. And we won the gold medal, which you can see in this photo here at the state conference. And that's an award based off the last 3 years of an agency. That gold medal means a lot to us. It kind of signifies in a lot of ways that we are the gold standard for the state, and I think it's very easy for us to say that we're one of the best in the state. The cool thing about that gold medal is the previous 3 winners are all up for the National Gold Medal Award this year, which means I think we're right on the cusp of being one of the best departments in the nation as well, and that's kind of the standard we've held ourselves to.
Awesome.
And it wouldn't happen without this team. I've got an incredible team. I've been in public service for 21 years and 5 different agencies, and I would put this team up against anyone. It's an incredibly resilient team, as we saw this weekend. It's an innovative team. It's a creative team that works really hard, and we're very fortunate to have them. Part of the reason they're so great at what they do is because they just absolutely love to serve, and they love this community. We have a lot of my staff that live in the community, a lot are from this community, but they absolutely love to pour in to this community. And I get a chance to get on my soapbox about once a year, so I'm going to take it. When you see a public service employee, and that's not just Parks and Rec, but that's all the employees that you have in the city, sometimes I think people forget those are spouses, those are parents, those are their nieces and nephews, their children and grandchildren. And when you're in public service, so is your family. First 21 years of my life, I watched the fireworks show with my dad every single year. And my sons and daughters can't say that about me. They've been in the same park as me, but we don't get to hang out like that. That's not what a public service employee, and you know, that's not the legacy they pass on. And so there's a lot of sacrifice. This crew that you see here to the left, they were at the lake at 6 a.m. 4th of July, and they were cleaning up Costco, Hendrickson, and Stonehill at 10 o'clock that night. And so it's a hardworking crew, but there's a lot of people left at the house as well. There's a lot of holidays they miss. We're a 363 day a year. We don't deploy Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day, but every other day of the year, every other holiday that you can think of, Easter, 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, those experiences, those memories that you have with your family, those don't always happen with our crew. And so it is public service for sure. Speaking of the fireworks, it was Thursday, July 3rd at 4 o'clock when we got a call from Typhoon Texas, our partner, that the site that we had approved for months and that we've used for years, the vendor couldn't get to. And so we got the task in 1 hour to really thread a needle on a new site, 500 to 600 radii, which was 1,000 to 1,200 diameter of space that had no buildings, no humans, and no combustible locations that are still close enough to our partner Typhoon Texas to be able to, you know, appease that community as well and shoot this show off. We had Public Works on the call, we had Public Safety on the call, we had CMO on the call. Ultimately, we found the spot that we thought we could do it on was on Pfluger Farms Road. We had to shut down the road, we had to get clearance from Public Works, Public Safety to do that. And then we had to reach out to Typhoon Texas, get approval. We had to reach out to the vendor and get approval. They had to reach out to their licensing agency and their insurance to make sure they could move it this close. And ultimately, you can see these are all user-submitted photos. Went off with the hitch. We saw a lot of people. The weather was coming. We didn't know the impact that we were going to have, but the weather was coming. And we saw a lot of agencies cancel around us. We held our water, working with Joe and his leadership, the emergency management team. It's just one guy, but all of us that report to him in an emergency situation. We found a window that we thought we could shoot it off, and it worked out. We were very fortunate. Then the following morning, we were in triage for the next couple of days. The storm did not obviously hit us as bad as it hit Georgetown and our neighbors to the west of us. But it did hit us for sure, and our staff that had been doing that 4th of July and clearing those parking lots the day before, we're up at 7 o'clock the next morning working on what was happening in our community, make sure we could get it ready for our residents. First of all, you can see the railings, which held up incredibly well. We brought those railings to y'all last year, and that's the type of investment we don't always see with other cities, but y'all invested in that type of infrastructure, and not only has it allowed us to have a safer trail system, but we can turn that trail system around quicker, because when we can clear the debris, we don't have to go out and replace the railings and make it safe again. The railings are already there. They withstood.
Yeah, and to the railings, Mize, I know, Shane, I mean, as long as I've lived in Pflugerville, the railings we've had before always get washed down
That's right,
and get destroyed. So I'm glad we made that investment. They
Yeah, me too. And I think the residents are able to get in and through those spaces quicker now because of it. And I think it's important to note, I was talking to a vendor, the park system did exactly what it's designed to do. Park system is a quality of life tool. We use it as a space to invite people for programming and events. We try to really pour into people. But we get park system space from developers who can't put homes in these spots for this very reason. We get floodplain land, and it safely loaded and unloaded that water as it's designed to do. And so that's another portion of what Parks does, is it safely loads and unloads water in these types of events, and hopefully keeps it off the homes that are near around there. And I think we had to shut down Railroad for a little bit. But other than that, I think for the most part, from what I've heard, we didn't have the damage to the homes that others have. So I'll hop off my soapbox. What we manage over 1,700 acres, parks, greenbelt, and open space, over 60 miles of trails, 33 acres of sports fields, 34 parks with 32 playgrounds, rec center classes, programs, citywide special events, pavilions, gazebos, picnic tables, escape park, 2 dog parks. It's actually 3 dog parks now. 3 outdoor pools, 2 splash pads, and a 180-acre water reservoir, Lake Pflugerville. Our core functions: park operations and maintenance, recreation programs, special events, facility maintenance, rentals, permits, events and field allocations, park planning, construction, and safety. We talk about it a lot internally. I don't know if I've always talked about it to you, but I think I've mentioned it before. I think when you think of all those holidays that you have, when you go back to a kid and you went and visited cousins on a Thanksgiving, you played the playground lottery. You went to whatever playground was near wherever they lived, and you hope it was an adequate play space. And I don't think the residents here do that. Thanks to the support that y'all have had, you can see the average age of our playgrounds have gone from 13.8 to 4.8 in the last 5 years. You can see the amount of playgrounds we've replaced. We still have 3 more that are over the age of 15 right now, and one's being replaced. Cambridge Estates will just have Old Town Park and Lake Pflugerville as the only 2 left that will have over the age of 10 at the end of those replacements. We've added new playgrounds. We've added 8 playgrounds with ADA safety surfacing. We've brought the shade up to 100% of our shade canopy. And you can see the investment spend right at $4 million has been spent on playground replacements. A little under $1 million of that over 5 years from the general fund, 2.5 from developer funding. Then there's been some support from PCDC and other grants as well. New year, new us. So since I've been here a year ago, giving this presentation, you can see to the left all the things we've added to the park system. Heritage Park, Phase 2 of Wells Point, Stonehill Sports Court, Cambridge Heights, Zola, and a couple others that I'll highlight here. So Heritage Park, at the time our Mayor Pro Tem was there to receive an award that we won for the design of that park. And a photo that shows that it's for new and old, or maybe young and distinguished.
There you go.
Attendees at this park. And then you can see we had a future influencer on the right there, but it's a super popular park. People use it all the time.
I'm loving that shade structure too.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a pretty innovative one because we had to go up vertical with it, and it was something the vendor had never done before, but they worked with us, and we push our vendors hard to hit our demands to serve this community. Stonehill, this is the first gopher system in the state of Texas. It's also the first sport court in the country that has a mural on it, has the gopher system on it, and was a partnership with the local sports association or sports club, Austin FC. And it was a great day. We had a lot of fun doing the grand opening. The kids had a blast. You can see we take our sport seriously. This kid on the left here is hammering home a goal, but it's a it's a court that you can do soccer, you can do basketball on it, you can do a multiple of other sports as well, and it's a beautiful spot. Cambridge Heights, that's got our first Ninja Warrior course on the right and a playground upgrade on the left. Wilbarre Creek South is our newest dog park. It's got turf, it's got DG, and it's got natural grasses. It's the first that we've ever implemented all three surfaces. We had two esteemed ribbon cutters, obviously our mayor, and then Fido, I can't remember his name, but we had the dog support as well for our ribbon cutting, and you can see our dogs enjoyed the space. They were having the time of their life. Our four-legged friends and our two-legged friends were really enjoying themselves out there. And just like every other park, this is built for the extrovert and the introvert, the large and the small. That's someone's dog up here. I won't say whose, but it's a great spot, and we're seeing a lot of play out there, a lot of use. Another one is Verona Park, where we worked with the HOA to do some upgrades. Wells Point, which is the phase 2 of hopefully 3 phases of improving that. The grass out there, Ruiz, Councilmember Ruiz, I know it's soccer, but the folks that are out there, I think we could throw football out there as well if that appease you. But
they got to have fun too.
That's right. We've definitely been improving the play surface of that space. We've added the fences as well. It's lights and restrooms next. The dry area next to Falcon Point Splash got a renovation. It got ADA surfacing and the 2 to 5 playground with the swings. And Gillen Creek got half of its renovations. Its other half is coming. Got the ADA surfacing and some of the play improvements. Falcon Point, this has been a very popular play improvement as well. With the turf and the hill and some of the climbing apparatus, something new we added to the space. And Wilbarre Creek got the shade over the turf area. New things to highlight this year. We have a Citizen Forester program for the first time. We gained a new partner in the Pflugerville Parks Foundation. Finalized 2 master plans. Worked on the final program draft for the Monarch Rec Center, and then received the Trail Capital of Texas designation. Our Citizen Forester program, 13 in the inaugural class that can help Dave go out in the community and plant and triage our plantings, ensure that they're doing okay, and offset some of the time that he spends out there with planting programs. Pflugerville Parks Foundation hit the ground running in year 1. They've already done some cleanups. They did a fun run. I don't know how fun it is to run 6 miles, but they did it in honor of our 60th year as a birthday as a city. And so they've already hit the ground running year 1, doing some stuff to support our cause. And then their Trail Capital Texas designation. You can see I really wowed the legislation. They look like they're rethinking some of their life decisions being there. But we were fortunate to get that across the finish line. Special thanks to Brianna and CMO staff as well, helping us along the way with that. And as I like to do, I made shirts to celebrate. So y'all each have 3 new shirts. You can help us market and promote our Trail Capital of Texas designation. The one on the left is the NASA version, and it says our trails are out of this world, and the comet's got a goat on it. The middle is our Trail Boss shirt with the topo font, and then the Trail Capital of Texas with our unofficial mascot, the goat, with the lake and the water tower and a trail going through it. But as I close and as I talk to y'all every time, we can't measure smiles. I think other cities hyper-focus on investing in only what they can measure. And I am so proud that this leadership team from CMO to this council continues to support things that can't be measured necessarily, that you just continue to invest in the return on investment that we know is there when we have fantastic quality, parks and rec programs. Because with your support, I think people get to experience parks in a way that they don't always get to experience. They get to realize sometimes parks are for them, that they're welcome in these spaces. I think also with your support, we get to put on multi-generational events where a granddad gets to do fishing with his grandson. We get to provide really cool spaces where people can cool off and let it out when they need to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to let it out from time to time. We get to provide opportunities where you learn that sharing is caring, and hopping in and helping out when needed is important. We go back to our cultural heritage as an ag community, although I don't think we had kangaroos in the 1850s, but you get to experience what it's like with the sheep and the goats and some of the other farm animals that we get to expose folks to with the petting zoo at Deutschenfest, and that parks are made for our four-legged friends as well. We get to provide, with a little ingenuity and cardboard, we get to see the imaginations of the next generation of these folks and the daringness. There's a lot of crazy kids that'll duct tape a cardboard boat and hop out in the middle of our pool. It's crazy. They have a lot of fun doing it. I think in some ways we get to provide spaces where the moms are heroes and get the opportunities to make some memories, not just the dads. And, maybe moms get some support when she tells you that your dad's not a great dancer. But most importantly, it's just a spot where we get to hang out and hang out as friends, cheese up for the camera, and celebrate that we have more alike than that we have different. Celebrate that this is a spot for everyone to belong to, and that culture matters. Where you came from, your culture is important to us because it's in our DNA as well. It's where we came from. And learning about culture through food and music is important. It's important to also point out that you can be different, and that's okay. But we have a rich diversity of people that participate in our community, and it brings them all out for our programs and events. And it's more important that we're all here now, not where we came from. So we appreciate this council giving us the support to put on programs and events at facilities that bring us all together.
See, that needs to be a piece of PSA right there. That's a commercial.
I don't have a question.
Commercial for Pflugerville. Every word he said and every picture.
So Shane,
In the t-shirt.
I could speak on what you've just said and the impact that this department and over the years has had on our community, because 61 years ago I would have never imagined being part of the park system that we have today. And it goes to show you how a community and how the leadership on council and staff can come together. And I will say, and I need to give our city manager credit for this as well, because she has brought on some very innovative, creative, exciting individuals that have led our departments, especially Parks and Recreation and some of the other departments here tonight. And that's something I didn't see 20 years ago, wouldn't have never imagined it. And where we have come to is just totally exciting for me. It's not as exciting for the majority of people here in our community because they weren't here 61 years ago. And so this is awesome, awesome, awesome. And I wish that our community, and I know that we touch a lot of lives in Pflugerville through everything that we do, and everything that you've talked about. And I wish more of the community really understood and felt the impact of what our Parks and Recreation department is. It's not just a physical connection, it's a social and an emotional connection, which I think you've done an excellent job doing. So, the only thing I can say, and we have former council member McCord here, former council member White, and myself, I would say Pflugerville is one of the greatest, if not the greatest cities to live in. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Reading of the consent agenda. Council, you have any? There is
Five.
one. Which one?
5E.
5E.
5B to see the presentation.
5E and
5B as in boy.
okay. Not 5E. Not 5E.
Oh, no, both. Sorry.
Both, okay,
Yeah.
okay. 5B and 5E.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. All right. Council. All right.
All right, I have items 5B and 5E pulled from the consent agenda. 5A is approving an ordinance on second reading with a caption reading an ordinance of the City of Pflugerville, Texas, amending ordinance number 1203-15-02-24 of the City of Pflugerville, Texas, as amended by rezoning approximately 50.455 acres from Agriculture Development Reserve to Single-Family Residential District, 9.287 acres from Agriculture Development Reserve to Single-Family Mixed-Use District, 3.566 acres from Agriculture Development Reserve to General Business 1 District, and 12.28 acres from Agriculture Development Reserve to Parks, Facilities, and Open Space District, all out of portions of the Andrew Austin Survey Number 19, Abstract Number 38, and G.B. Simpleman and J.V. Bergen Survey Number 285, Abstract Number 2370 in Travis County, Texas, to be known as the Cameron Valley Rezoning, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. Again, items 5B and 5E have been pulled from the consent agenda. All remaining items may be acted upon in a single motion.
All right. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Did we capture everybody? Okay. Motion carried. Thank you. All right. Moving back to the presentation we started in work session on the, I guess, the budget and master fee schedule recommendations. We'll have those individuals come back and pick up where we left off.
All right, I think we left off on TCOs. As I was explaining before, your initial TCO is $100. Second renewal after 30 days is $500. After that, it's going to be double the previous amount for the third thereafter. So it is meant to get these projects closed out. They're just lingering too long on this TCO. I think, so 60 days, 90 days, that's 3 months. That's a pretty good chunk of time to be able to close things out and hopefully get your CO, because it is going to get punitive, unfortunately.
When you say double the previous amount for the third and the
Like, it
thereafter,
doubles
so the
every
third
time?
is 1,000, the fourth is 2,000,
Correct.
then 4,000, 8.
Yes.
Okay.
And 8 and 16.
So we're encouraging them to get finished.
Yes.
All right.
Will you provide clarity as to the reason why it's critical to close these projects out so that they can have a permanent certificate of occupancy?
So a lot of times, what's pending might be on the engineering and planning side, typically. Rarely, or on some occasions, there might be some fire-related items. Rarely are there building-related items. We try to make sure that the place is safe and can be occupied safely, but a lot of times there's infrastructure or other elements on the exterior of the building. The developers tend to get hyper-focused on the building and they forget about the site elements on the exterior. And this is just about the only thing you can hang over them in order to prod them to get this thing done is their CO.
Do you have to continue to issue a temporary CO?
Not necessarily. There have been a couple of unique cases where we've had to rescind it. Maybe a department is just not getting cooperation from that developer, and they've reached out to me and say, don't renew it. And that usually gets their attention as well. Because it's harder to kick someone out once they're in than it is to never let them in to begin with.
Yeah.
So we don't have a whole lot of these, do we? I mean, I wouldn't think we would, but.
Percentage of projects, I'd say maybe like 5 to maybe. There are a couple of
Yeah.
ones that have hung out there for a little while. Okay, continue it. Any other questions on the COs, TCOs? Okay. Commercial standalone, kind of unique here in Pflugerville, the way we approach standalone permits by alteration levels, going up a little bit on alteration level 1 and alteration level 2. This is primarily to capture the extensive amount of inspections it takes on these alterations. As anyone who's done construction before tell you, it's much easier to build something brand new than it is to remodel anything. It's just way more intense and more things to look at and consider, a lot more discretionary calls that are made when you're talking about alterations. Building plan reviews, new residential units going from 70 to 140, residential revisions. This is after something's been approved and then they come back and make a significant revision. Typically, this is happening when they want to flip the home. In other words, the house would be a left-hand swing, the garage is on the left, and then for some reason they want to flip it to the right. We have to do another review, or they change the floor plan completely. Architectural review.
Yeah, architectural reviews is, that's gonna be a fee that is really looked at, is focused on recovering the cost that staff time puts into reviewing the architectural design. That's generally gonna be in larger developments that have multiple types of design that we just wanna make sure meet standard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on the pause fees, there was no actual change to the fees, but there was some upgrades to the notes that will be under the fees. Just giving the director a little bit more discretion on adjusting or waiving fees, so that's what the first one is. And then just capturing a footnote about all fees and charges incurred from and how it will be charged against the obligation of the owner. So just making sure that we can recoup costs in those cases. So these are both footnote changes. Library fees just had one change. This was taken out of their policy by the library board, and so we're removing it from the fee schedule. The police fees were just increasing the per application fee for residential and commercial permitting. These are alarm permits.
Is there going to be an online application at some point, or is it going to continue to be like a form that you have to fill out and then
Online.
send in?
Has it been implemented yet? I think it's coming.
It's coming.
Yeah,
Yes.
online.
Okay.
The voice from the back of the room. Okay, and just under the miscellaneous fee schedule, taking out the words credit card and just replacing it with payment processing fee. We do have other fees that aren't necessarily credit card, and so we just wanted to make that distinction. And also adding the naming and renaming application fee, which was a policy that was passed earlier in the year. So just adding that fee to the fee schedule. And last but not least, park fees. I'll be your clicker.
Okay, we're going up on the pavilion fee. It is it was a 12-hour fee, now it's a 10-hour fee to reflect the potential new time, if approved, where the ordinance will go to 9 o'clock at the lake. If for some reason that didn't get approved, we'd bump that back to 9. You can see that we changed all the other ones from 10 to 9 because it was aware to us this year during a couple of pavilion rentals that the curfew for the park is 10 and the pavilion ends at 10, the rentals end at 10. And so it was tough for them at sometimes to get out and to feel like they had the time to clean up that they needed. And so we're bumping those rentals to 9, so they still have the time to clean up and be out of the park by the curfew.
What's the reason for the significant fee increase?
So it's those two were looked at, it's tough to find pavilions that are similar to those. We looked at one, actually Round Rock for both for this example, for the two increases. For the pavilions there, the lake and Gillen Creek, and they were at 200 and 225, I believe, and we were at 175 and 150. This puts us above them, but it also reflects that pavilion's rented all the time, every Saturday, every Sunday, and the amount of time that our staff has before and after in cleanup, it wasn't even really recovering its cost. And so in this fiscal environment that we're going into, we felt that, first of all, the market was there. I think a lot of people do rentals and pavilions and birthday parties out there, and they'll bring a $500 pavilion rental and a DJ and everything else. So I don't think the cost has been a deterrent for what they're spending on the overall event of their party. But this also helps us recover more so the cost of what it's taking for us to clean it up and to get it ready for these people. And it's a little above our competitors in Round Rock, but it's in line with what we were doing, and we were below Round Rock for years with that.
So, are these the only times available? Like, do you have half days, or is this just here because you're making a change?
I'm sorry.
Do you have half day rentals, or like
No,
if you
just-
want it?
just one full day rental. So it's first come, first serve unless it's rented. And the reason that we don't have like a half day rental is Tracy's family rents it from 9 to 1. Well, then we've got to block it off, and we've got to clean it up before Tracy's family gets there. The rental happens. We got to clean it up after Tracy's family gets there, because now Jonathan's family comes and rents it from 7 to midnight or whatever, 7 to whatever 4 hours from 7 is 11. And so that's why I'm so bad at finance. Simple math. But so it's one of those where then not only are we cleaning before and after, we're now doing a middle cleaning as well. And so we just do the 12 hours, and we've always done the 12 hours. And for a lot of reasons, we've done the 12 hours, but one of them is it's not how much times our staff has to do that. And if we did it at just the pavilion, Lake Pflugerville potential, that would be one thing. But if we did a 4-hour rental at every pavilion, every Green Red Barn, and so our staff is now turning over not just one facility twice in a day, they're turning over all 8 rentable facilities twice in a day, twice in a weekend potentially, or 4 times in a weekend. And we just don't have the staff for it.
Maybe it was a few more years ago where I believe there were half day rentals, at least at the Green Red Barn.
There might have been.
Because there was, a birthday party for a 5-year-old, $500, it's a barrier for some families, I would say. But
it's gone up. I think if you were going to do the pavilion or the birthday party, there'd be cheaper alternatives elsewhere in our park system.
Apparently.
Yeah.
That's still pretty cheap.
Comparative to private sector.
Very cheap.
Sure.
Well, yeah, I'm comparing it to in your backyard.
Yeah.
Where maybe you don't want it in the
I'll be
backyard.
glad to rent out my backyard.
Yeah.
$4.99.
Or for someone who lives in an apartment, and
Sure.
doesn't have a space,
Yeah.
having it. So I guess you just have to have it in the park and not at the pavilion. So.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people that have a lot of birthday parties in our open spaces all throughout our park system. Not only first come, first serve, but in the spots in between those rentable and reservable areas. But we didn't raise the Green Red Barn fee this year. The other ones obviously have been raised. And it's all about recovering the cost more in the economic climate we're in and seeing what our neighbors have been doing with some of these facilities. And so like Finning, for example, soccer field is in line with what Round Rock's charging for their cheaper fields. Their more expensive fields were $40, which is in line with some of the improvements that we did on that side as well.
Well, we've always been cheaper or less expensive in our soccer field rentals than everybody else around us.
We're getting that, and we're markedly moving that
Right.
back towards maybe the higher end. But I think if you observed's not the right word. If you reviewed our field offering from at least the time I got here, I don't want to speak before I got here till now, the contracted experience that R3 provides is the same experience they provide at the Round Rock Express Fields. And so you get a high level of play, and it's a very safe play. When I was first here, my very first summer here, we did a July is Parks and Rec month, and we did a free flag football event in the park. And 1849, someone had to have a leg amputated because of the injury they experienced out there. And I don't think that we contributed to that, but I think we've raised the playing surface, how safe it is out there. It's a much safer surface to fall on. It's a much safer surface to cut on. The sports turf that's out there, it's not an artificial turf, but it's grass that's specifically designed for sports fields. It's very resilient, stays green throughout the year, and it's a very safe space to play on. And we've been doing that at the other facilities as well. So Wells Point gets that now. 1849 baseball, softball will get that as well.
Do you have, Shane, do you have somebody that is designated, kind of like in a golf course, they have the
Master.
Yeah.
You talking about the
somebody that
the
tends to the landscaping and the grass, but they're specialists in that area.
Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Some sort of superintendent
But
or?
we used to do it by self-defense, right?
Okay.
Like, we're Parks and Rec people trying to make sure we were evaluating the
Groundskeeper.
horticulture. You know, we were taking samples and sending it to
Yeah.
Texas A&M and getting
Yeah.
reviews and getting their recommendation. But now that we work with R3 out of Round Rock, they do all that for us in our sports fields. And so the
So,
sports,
so they manage the care of the fields
Absolutely.
and how they're treated and fertilized and watered and
Absolutely.
all that stuff.
allows us to be the recreation
Perfect.
professionals
Okay.
and them to be the horticulture professionals.
So this is reflecting the investment that we've made into our fields.
Absolutely. And you could triple those fees and you could probably get someone to rent them because the youth sports experience, what it is, everyone's looking for field space. You're still subsidizing in some ways even these fees because you're hoping and trying to make sure that this community gets to enjoy those spaces. So it is reflective of that, and it's also reflective of what it's offered in the area. But I don't want anyone to think that's a 100% cost recovery number. We're not there to that point.
And the baseball and softball fields are open?
Not open yet.
Okay,
No,
so
but-
this is just anticipation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fine. Same thing that we talked about earlier with the field fees here. We added a field prep fee for baseball, softball, an excess allocation fee. So when I first got here, we were allowing people to be on the field 16 hours a week. We've gotten to the point where we're at 25 or 30? 30 hours a week. As the field turf has grown and its resistance has grown, we've continued to add hours. But if a sports association needs on there 33, 35, 40 hours a week, that will eventually wear those fields out. So there is a specific fee when it goes over their allocation, that if they need extra hours, there's a fee for that. And then lighting, because we have football fields now will be lit and baseball fields will be lit. Lock penalty, punitive, I think is the word Robert used earlier. You know, it's one of those where when they lose the lock, they expose the whole system to damage. And so, Pazel, for example, last year, what was their overall fee? What they pay?
About $30,000.
$30,000. So, you know, if they have forgotten to lock 5 times, it will be $1,000 more on that $30,000 bill. I think some people see that and think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money. All we're trying to do is make sure that they leave the gate every night and lock it behind them. That's what we're trying to do with that fee. If they don't, the field that Pazel uses, but Tracy's team uses it the next day, if someone goes out there and ruts it up and tears it up, not only is Tracy's team not getting to it, Pazel's team's not getting to it, and it might be 3 or 4 weeks before we're able to do the reparative damage that might have happened to those fields. And so there would be a loss of revenue in some of those and maintenance fees. So
So we don't have a site, not a site
Coordinator.
manager, coordinator, or whatever.
No, we have rangers go around and lock parks up at night, that system up at night, and they go around and tell us if those gates are getting locked or not. But we don't have rangers working every night, so it is on the soccer clubs, and they sign it. They initial and sign it that they know they need to lock the gates behind them. The only thing I guess here's changed is what swim practice and swim meet cost for a lifeguard. It was subsidized greatly over the years when you think of how many lifeguards you would have out there. And we're just raising that fee up a little bit. That's not recovering the cost of what it takes to have lifeguards out there.
It recovers the cost of one lifeguard.
So,
What's a table reservation? I mean, what are you talking about there?
So the new tables.
oh, Gillen Creek, that's the tables. So we have tables at Scott Menser, and we're getting tables at Gillen
So
Creek.
these are just tables
Yep.
throughout, okay.
You can reserve.
Because right now there's not.
Like a cabana, but with no shade.
Right.
There will be
Oh,
shade.
no,
Yeah.
don't
They'll
talk shade.
We shade, yep.
Oh,
It'll be
okay,
going
you're shade.
under
Oh,
the
it's gonna have
council-approved shade and artificial turf.
Ah,
So
okay,
it'll be
awesome.
going in that
A
area.
designated place to sit and put
Yeah.
your stuff
Yep.
and have maybe a party.
Birthday party. There you go. Cheaper. There you
Yes,
go. There's your
instead of the pavilion.
We found it. We solved the problem. All right. We just changed what it costs for gates and admissions to just varies by events, because it does. So Slice is free. Deutsche Fest costs a fee. Portable restrooms, we raised it from 1 every 100 attendees to 1 every 500 attendees. We have an athletic permit fee that's new, and an event impact fee. So like when you think about the floating
The water lantern.
Water Lantern Festival, they had 3,000 people out there in attendance, all paid $60 or $70 for a lantern or whatever. And they were impacting the space, but we didn't have any way to capture anything other than like a $200 permit fee. And so we'll be using our placer data to show if they had a couple thousand people out there, they'll owe that as well.
What's the reason for the change in the portable restrooms?
It was becoming a little bit of a toilet city at some of the.
All right,
permit
that's what I was
events.
thinking.
Yeah. So for instance, like Pride, we were having to estimate how many people they would have. And when you're doing 1 per every 100, they ended up with like 25 portable toilets, and only about half of those got used. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So just a few changes on the utility fees. We did want to acknowledge that a commercial application is more complicated and takes a little bit longer than a residential. So instead of a new account being 30, residential will be 30, commercial will be 50. And wanted to call out the new customer, no water customer. This was not specified in our master fee schedule, but we wanted to make sure that people understood there is a monthly base charge plus volume. It's based on the citywide winter average, so we just wanted to make sure and add that to our, when you're a new customer, you don't have a winter average yet. So we have to apply the citywide winter average to your account until you get those 12 months and are able to establish a winter average. We also have customers who are not on our water system, therefore we have to apply the same methodology to them as well.
So they have wastewater, but not water.
Correct. So we have to have a methodology to charge them wastewater. Yeah. This is a lot of words, but really it's just a footnote change to our catastrophic water leak policy. I think the takeaways here, originally you could only apply for this one time per account. Now we allow it once in a 3-year period. It also takes out a little bit of the complication and just specifies that it would be based on the prior month's water use. I think we actually have changed this to the same month in the prior year. That way we're comparing it equals to equals. And that the customer must fill out the request within 90 days. So, it's not just an endless period that they would have the opportunity to apply for the credit. And I believe that's it. Same timeline. We'll be looking forward to some more budget workshops in August and an adoption in September.
So just a clarification, August 8th is the Friday.
Yeah, I think this was.
Is it August 12th?
Yeah, it's August 12th, and then the adoption is September.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the, let's see, do we have anything else on the regular agenda? I guess not. All right, Trista, you have the,
Yes, I do. We will be starting with item 5B, approving an ordinance on second reading with the caption reading an ordinance of the City of Pflugerville, Texas, amending ordinance number 1203-15-02-24 of the City of Pflugerville, Texas as amended by approving a specific use permit for an office warehouse use on approximately 5.835 acres zone urban center corridor level 4 district located at 19241 Wilkie Lane to be known as the Work Hub Pflugerville specific use permit, providing a cumulative and repealer clause, providing for a non-severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Was there a specific question? Or
Well, there were questions from the public about the impact on a certain number of items as well as the rendering, so just wanted to
Yeah.
get that information.
Sure, Doctor.
I think they submitted renderings. Or,
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, Yasmin Cherk, Planning Manager. I've been in contact with a resident who expressed or had questions, and we've been responding to all of his questions through email.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
No.
Thank you.
okay.
So everyone was happy with the renderings that we requested, I guess.
I'm sorry that I don't
Okay.
recall, I don't remember them agreeing to say they were doing the rendering, so I'm.
Yeah, we got new renderings.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you wanna see them,
No, I just wanted to just
Oh.
make sure that everyone, because people
So we're
had
good?
questions on it. Yeah, it looked good to me. I just.
All right, move to approve.
Okay.
Item 5B.
Have a motion,
second,
Sand a second. Okay. And motion carried. Thank you.
Next item is 5E, approving the purchase of trail and accessibility improvements along the Mountain Creek Trail located behind Ambrose Drive by Fun of Bounds, Inc. in the amount of $283,856 and authorizing the city manager to execute the same.
So this was questions that David sent to me. So, but I think, yeah, but I mean, there were changes that were being proposed from what was presented on the agenda packet. So I just wanted to get a clarification about what was going to be changed.
You bet. At Councilmember Rogers' request, this was removed from the agenda previously. We made some revisions. We verified that this was indeed a by-board purchase, which includes extensive terms and conditions that both parties have to comply with. I sent Councilmember Rogers a response to a couple of the questions he had on the agreement, which would include essentially removing the incorporated. He said he was okay one way or the other with respect to this part, but I would suggest we go ahead and remove the incorporated contractual provisions that are within the price estimate, and that would solve all of his concerns that he has. So a motion to approve, subject to removing the contractual provisions from the price estimate, and we have a good agreement.
So moved.
Second. Okay, motion carried. Are we done? We are adjourned. Thank you.